Recording in progress.
Good evening. I would like to call tonight's meeting of the Tacoma Park City Council to order. Would the clerk please call the roll?
Mayor Searcy.
Here.
Councilmember Fulcher.
Present.
Councilmember Dabala.
Here.
Councilmember Gibson.
Here.
Councilmember Siemens.
Present.
Councilmember Honzak.
Present.
Councilmember Small.
Yes, y'all.
Good evening, everyone. Sorry, forgive us as we get a little organized up here. Lots of papers that are going on. But we have had a change to the agenda for this evening. We have added a proclamation recognizing Ken Flimmer's 11 years of service to the city of Tacoma Park. So that is one thing that we will be doing this evening. We are also hosting a second public hearing on the proposed housing tax credits. There will also be 3 work sessions this evening. The first is the food insecurity grant recommendations. I know that we have people from our grants committee that is here. There's a presentation on the fiscal impact of proposed housing tax credits and discussion of the proposed housing tax credits. And there's also a work session on the FY25 budget amendment number 2. In terms of the rolling agenda for this week, on Wednesday, October the 23rd, we'll have our council meeting at the normal time of 7:30. During that time, we'll have a first reading tax credit ordinance, first reading ordinance approving the FY25 budget amendment number 2, ordinance approving food insecurity grant awards, and we'll have 2 work sessions. Actually, I think we're only going to have one, the unlawful restricted covenants. And I think I'm just trying to make sure that I have the latest agenda in terms of police vehicles. we don't?
Should be on the agenda.
Okay.
Police vehicles.
Okay, so it should be a work session on the police vehicle purchase. On Saturday, October the 26th is Monster Bash. Want to encourage everyone to come out and participate. On Wednesday, October the 30th, the council will meet at 7:30, and we will have a slew of voting items. The first is the second reading tax credit ordinance. The first reading ordinance approving the FY25 budget amendment number 2, single reading ordinance approving the purchase of police patrol vehicles, and a single reading ordinance approving multifamily building improvement grant awards. We will also have it looks like we are slated for a second work session on the unlawful restricted covenants, but that is tentative. On Thursday, October the 31st is Halloween. Tuesday, November the 5th is City Election Day. And Wednesday, November the 6th through Friday, November the 8th, is the Maryland Municipal League Fall Conference in Cambridge. And I know a number of council members will be attending that event. And because of the election and because of the conference, on Wednesday, November the 6th, the council will not meet. Also, just as a quick reminder, Monday, November the 11th, is Veterans Day. City offices and facilities are closed Sunday and Monday for the Veterans Day holiday. And Tuesday, November the 12th, is the Community Budget Forum, and the time and location are to be determined. So with that, I have the pleasure of reading a proclamation recognizing Ken Flimmer's 11 years of service to the city of Tacoma Park. Whereas Adventist Community Services of Greater Washington, ACS GW, is a community organization that supports people in need. And whereas Kenneth Flimmer served as the director of ACS from 2013 to 2024. And whereas in this role, Ken Flimmer brought enthusiasm and a high level of service to the organization and the community. And whereas he increased the number of volunteers and built a strong sense of mission among staff. And whereas he stabilized and improved the physical conditions of the ACS facility. And whereas through active outreach, he catalyzed community support, visibility of ACS and its services, and relationships with other organizations. And whereas during the COVID-19 pandemic, Kenneth Flimmer worked tirelessly to deliver and expanded much-needed services to those most affected, including hosting food distribution sites across the city. And whereas just one example of his commitment to this community is his immediate and personal response to the explosion and fire in the apartments at Arliss Street to organize an effort to meet the many needs of victims. And whereas Kenneth Flimmer has provided many years of much needed and valuable services to the residents of Tacoma Park and beyond. Now, therefore, I, Talisha Searcy, Mayor of the City of Tacoma Park, Maryland, on behalf of the City Council and residents, hereby proclaim our appreciation of Kenneth Flimmer's service to the residents of Tacoma Park, and we wish him the very best in his retirement. Wonderful. So we have a certificate here, but I do just want to continue to echo my appreciation to Ken and all of his hard work in the community. During COVID, the amount of food that was distributed, the amount of services that were provided to people, the coat drives, the just bringing people in the community together to serve others. And you did it with such a gracious spirit. So we wish you the best in your retirement, but I would be remiss in saying I am sad to see you go. Yes, you can.
I have appreciated the city council. When I first came to Adventist Community Services, it was that forgotten place that people forgot existed. And I would come here to the city council with your 3-minute rule and began to generate, using this as one of the forms to generate more interest and awareness. And we did work hard to refurbish the place and to serve during COVID when so many pantries were closing down. Capital Area Food Bank came and said, would you be a surge pantry? Then I stumbled on, I caught a whiff that the diaper bank was looking for new partners. And those two things really brought a lot of interest to the center and completely changed the demographics of the community that we serve. Prior to COVID, it was a lot of retirees, Caribbean Americans. They didn't go away. It's just that it expanded with this whole new population, which made it feel like the retirees went away. But when you looked at the numbers and the names, you realize they were still there. So thank you very much to the City Council and to the City of Tacoma Park.
Thank you so much. And so with that, I just want to make sure that we honor you with this certificate and proclamation. Oh, sorry. Yeah, we're going to do a picture.
Group picture? Okay.
It's what we do.
Everybody wants a picture with King Plummer.
Good, how you doing? No mistake. Who am I hiding here? Okay, I'm ready. 1, 2. 1, 2.
All right. Wonderful. So now we are going to move to all right, you all can see how lost I am when I have three copies of an agenda up here. But I think I got it in order. All right. The next item on the agenda for this evening is a public hearing on the proposed tax credits. And I just want to check with our clerk to see if we had anyone sign up, or we're just going to go. I work with that. I can work with that. All right. So if you have any public comments on the proposed housing tax credits, please come down.
Good evening. I'm Bob Dreher, and I live in Ward 3. I'm an environmental lawyer with a lot of experience reviewing planning documents. It's essential for planning documents to accurately define the status quo, because that is the baseline against which a project's impacts and its benefits are measured. If the baseline is not accurate, a project's impacts may look less severe, or its benefits may look better than they really are. Unfortunately, BAE's fiscal analysis of the proposed tax credit, which you're going to talk about tonight, relies on a fundamentally flawed analysis of the status quo for housing development in Tacoma Park. The key questions for the city are whether the proposed tax credit is needed to stimulate construction of multifamily housing, and whether the city can afford it. Both of those questions depend on whether future buildings that claim the tax credit would have been built anyway, without the tax credit. If they would have been, then the tax credit wasn't needed, and the foregone tax revenue from those buildings, $24 million according to BAE, will be a very large and very real loss to the city's finances. Proponents of the tax credit say that multifamily housing will not be built without a tax subsidy, and that foregone taxes are thus not a real loss. BAE's report supports that argument by asserting flatly that under the status quo, without the proposed tax credit, no multifamily housing will be built in Tacoma Park at all. They note that no multifamily housing has been built in the city for the past 20 years, and blame the city's rent control policies and the lack of available land. The problem with that analysis is that the landscape for housing development in Tacoma Park has changed dramatically. The Adventist Hospital site is now available and is being actively planned for development, and the Tacoma Park Minor Master Plan Amendment has rezoned that site and all of Maple Avenue to promote development. County planners estimate that as many as 3,500 new residential units may be added to our city as a result. Everybody involved in the MMPA process expects that the new zoning and the hospital site will promote substantial new housing development in Tacoma Park. But BAE leaves that out of their analysis of the status quo. They say no new housing will occur in Tacoma Park without a tax credit. Oddly enough, they include both the MMPA and the hospital site in their analysis of the tax credit scenario. Those are major factors, they say, in promoting housing. So there's obviously a false comparison here. A fair analysis would acknowledge that the MMPA and the hospital site are part of the status quo already and will likely promote substantial new housing with or without a tax subsidy. The real question is whether a tax break would lead to additional housing, and whether the long-term revenues from such additional housing would offset the losses that will result from developers claiming the tax credit for buildings that they would have built anyway. But BAE doesn't ask or answer that question. BAE thus presents a false and misleading picture of the potential financial impact of the tax break. I urge you to send it back to them for more analysis and not to act until you have that analysis. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Do we have any other public comments this evening?
Good evening. My name is Enrica De Tragiache. I am also a resident of Ward 3, and I am an economist by training, and I've looked at a lot of fiscal impact studies of policy changes in my career. I had not talked to Bob ahead of this meeting, but I had kind of the same reaction that he had reading the study, which is that the study does not really present a comparison between the with subsidy and without subsidy situation, and therefore its impact on the budget, taking into account the new minor master plan effects on land availability. So as Bob has said, I believe that the conclusion of the study are unclear, confusing, and potentially, and really do not provide guidance to the council on the topic of whether this subsidy really will achieve its goal at a reasonable fiscal cost. I would also add one angle to the comments, which is that a full fiscal impact analysis should also look at other items in the budget, not just the property tax. A big influx of residents into the city would have effects, presumably, on the spending side of the budget. Some of these may be offset by increasing county rebates for services, maybe not the entire amount. But these topics need to be covered by a fiscal impact study, and they're not even mentioned in the study that is being made available. So I know the last thing you probably want to hear is more work needs to be done, but I think this is where we are. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Do we have any other public comments this evening?
When do I start?
Right now.
Okay. My name is David Navari. It's good to see you all again. I've met most of you. I want to thank the council for their time and effort to make a city a better place to live, and thank you so much for exploring ways to increase the tax base in housing. And it was great to hear from Randy that we have a real pro as the new city manager. I spent 20 years at a consulting firm under contract with the federal government. One of my duties was developing OMBA 94 cost-benefit analysis, similar to BAE's, to support decision-making. Every financial analysis compares alternatives. One, do nothing, that's the status quo, which is no tax credit. And two, decide to implement some decision, which for us is vote for the new tax credit. The report provides excellent charts with clear data visualization that I think tell a compelling story. But I'm baffled by the statement on page 19. The project team anticipates that the new rental housing tax credit will not incentivize redevelopment and replacement of existing multifamily facilities with new multifamily housing projects, and no new housing units will be produced in the area. Randy, I would have appreciated if you'd told BAE about the Adventist Hospital site and the county master plan. BAE's rationale, since the property taxes only comprise around 7% of building owner's tax, eliminating taxes would only save the owner 7%, which is not enough to motivate additional investment. This statement fails to acknowledge that 7% goes right to the bottom line. So if they're making 10%, 7% on top of that is a boatload of impact. My question, how in God's name can there possibly be a scenario where there's no new development? How? With this giant hospital site up there. BAE's status quo assumptions are baffling and, in my opinion, nonsensical. Unfortunately, with one alternative flawed, the entire analysis is flawed and cannot support effective decision-making. About the author's page 23 conclusion, bullet 5, assuming 1,285 new multifamily rental units, the team estimates the new tax credit result in just over $24 million in foregone property taxes. That means that's taxes we'll never collect. Bullet 6, the team estimates the new rental housing units would generate just over $27 million in additional revenue over the 30 years. So that's great. More revenue than tax loss. That's great. The one problem is the tax loss is in the first 15 years from 2025 to 2040, but the net revenue gain is from 2040 to 2050 in the last 15 years when most of us will be dead. In summary, the report is flawed, unfortunately, and does not provide you factually correct data to make an informed decision. That's just a fact. Even if the status quo option made sense, all of the gains are in the next 15 years, and then we have to make up the taxes that aren't collected, that are given away to the developers to support the services.
Thank you, Mr. Navari. I think your time is up.
Please ask BAE to go back to the drawing board, revise their report so you guys can make an informed decision. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Do we have any other public comments on housing tax credits?
Hey, good evening. Emmanuel Wagner, Ward 2. Thank you so much for the opportunity to provide comments. Also, happy German Heritage Month. It's October. Welcome to Oktoberfest and all of that. Also, last week was National Hydrogen Day. You may know me as one of the hydrogen advocates, so go hydrogen. I want to talk about the tax credit, though. And so I'm here, in support of the tax credit. I do actually share a good amount of the criticism that we've heard. The BAE report looks at basically two bookends, right? One, do nothing, the other, extreme build out. That's not helpful for a good discussion. We should have really had some scenarios where it compares, likely sets of developments with, likely sets of developments based on county developments, based on, good estimates that the consultants should really be able to produce. The problem that we're kind of seeing is exactly what we're hearing is, you're jumping at the extreme scenario and say like, oh, the tax credit is not great because we are going to have all this foregone revenue. We're not going to have these 2,500 housing units be built at that one site. That's extreme. So the analysis in itself is just not great. There are some, it should have been, okay, let's leave it at that. What it also doesn't include are the two other tax credits, which would have kind of been nice to have an analysis for. And also look at the part that is the not Washington Hospital, Adventist Hospital site, because it actually just looking at that, but the tax credit is available for the whole city. So, a little bit more detail. And if they give the assumptions that they're using in order to feed the model, that's good, we can discuss that. But right now, it kind of paints extremes, and so our rhetoric here, it sounds a little extreme. We still, as a city, need to continue to develop, support the economic development and housing development. And those tax credits would be a good tool to do that. Unfortunately, the analysis doesn't actually do much in support or in opposition to that. We haven't seen new housing in 25 years, according to the report. I think other analysis has 50 years of no new multifamily housing built in the city. That's a problem. We've actually, according to the report, lost rental housing that was converted to owner housing. So that's not great either. What I would suggest is tweak on the side of the economic development of the of the economic impacts. Take a look at whether or not you may want to extend the tax credits to 4 and plus housing units, because you're starting at 10 and that seems pretty arbitrary. The report itself talks about commercial housing starting at 4 plus units. Maybe just adjust that. And the other part, a lot of these developers they're taking on a huge amount of risk. Especially our city does not have a great name or reputation for developers to put anything in here. So we actually need to try to bring them here, and the tax credits are a great way to do that.
Thank you very much. Your time is up. Do we have any other public comments on the housing credits?
Hi, my name is Lucy Moore. I'm in Ward 3. I'm also running for City Council in Ward 3, but I'm here tonight actually to talk about the food insecurity reduction grants, which is later in the agenda. But I did want to since I'm here, take a moment to thank you all for your leadership on housing policy in this community. As many have said, we've not seen new housing built in this community since I've been here. And I see this as not only a commitment to providing more housing for everyone. I love the range of incentives you're providing. And there are a range of things I could say about why I'm excited about them. But I wanted to flag specifically the way in which they serve our sustainability values. I know we as a community really value sustainability, our commitment to carbon reduction. Our city sustainability and climate action plan specifically notes that half of our carbon emissions as a community are from transportation, are primarily vehicular emissions. So we've got a nice chart in there, and it's half of them are transit. And so if we are serious about carbon reduction, about doing something about climate change, we owe it to our city, to our future, to our neighbors, to make this a place that is welcoming of housing density. We live on the border of DC, which is a major employer. From my house, which is down in the corner of Tacoma Park near Eastern and New Hampshire, I can walk a mile in each direction and get to 2 major lines of our metro system. We have so many quality bus lines. We have the Purple Line coming in. We are well serviced by public transit, and that already exists. So I think we are missing a key piece of our climate action agenda if we are not embracing more density, and specifically more density near that public transit, which is a number of spots in this community. So thank you again for your leadership on this. I'm excited to see where you take it. I appreciate you taking the time to make sure you get all the information, but I also appreciate the fact that you all are trying to act efficiently because we need action, and I'm excited to see it. Thank you all.
Thank you very much. Do we have any other public comments on housing credits this evening? Okay.
We have one commenter online, Jan Ryan.
Okay.
Oh,
All right.
after.
Colleen Cordes, Ward 1. I wanted to especially point to the last of the tax credits that's gotten the least attention and seems to be downgraded again. I don't think it's even online as part of the agenda for tonight, the resolution for refurbishing, renovating the buildings, the aging buildings. And last week, Mayor Searcy, you made a very eloquent statement about the condition. You called, it sounded like you thought a lot of the multifamily rental buildings are in, you said, deplorable condition. And I don't think there's a connection between this major tax credit for new rental construction and doing anything about the deplorable condition of the buildings. I don't think there's a connection between that major, except that it would generate less tax money in the next, especially 15 years, to do something about those deplorable buildings. Unless the plan is to tear them down and have new construction at those sites, where will the money come from? So I'm asking you to please prioritize that tax credit, make it a real credit, make it a significant of money, go into that housing reserve fund that's just sitting there with like 1.2 or 1.3 million, finally come up with some guidelines for it and make that, we all recognize this as a priority. We agree with you, Mayor Searcy, that any aging building that is not providing a quality of life, let's help those landlords if they need financial support. Let's get these tax credits, this housing reserve fund money, let's get it going. And could that please be our city housing priority, since you and also Councilmember Honzak have made eloquent cases for why that needs to be a priority. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Do we have any other public comments on housing credits? If you're thinking about speaking, I need you to come on down, because once I go virtual, I'm not going back. All right. Okay, great. We're going to move to virtual comments on housing credits.
So we have one commenter, Jan Ryan. So Jan, you can speak if you want. She may be having some technical issues. Maybe go on to the general public comments and we'll try to come back to her.
Okay. Great. We will get back to Jan. Are there any public comments on any other matters this evening? General public comments.
Oh, actually, I'm unmuted now.
Sure.
Can you-
Go right ahead.
Happy Wednesday, folks. My name is Daniel Adams. I am a longtime volunteer and currently the board chair of Meals on Wheels of Tacoma Park. We're a small, independent, community-based nonprofit based here in Tacoma Park, obviously. And I'm here tonight to thank the city of Tacoma Park for, well, on behalf of Meals on Wheels, for your grants in the past couple of years. It means a lot to us to be supported and recognized by our community. And we especially thank the team at Tacoma Park that is recommending consideration for support this coming year. If anyone is not familiar with us, I want to make sure everyone knows who we are and what we're doing in the community. We got started in Tacoma Park in 1971. We're working out of the same kitchen, a few more upgrades since then. In 2023, we served over 55,000 meals. And to be able to receive our meals, the main qualifier besides living in our service area is that you must be homebound. This applies regardless of age or income. So you wouldn't be surprised that most of our clients are seniors, but many are not. We serve people who of any age who have difficulty getting out of the house, difficulty preparing their own meals. So that includes people with disabilities, for example, of all types, recovering from surgery, or sometimes they have a caregiver who is just taking a break. And we serve many of our clients for ongoing for years as needed. And we fill a gap that no other organization in our community fills. Prepared meals, a very simple thing, prepared meals brought to the doors of our homebound neighbors. So, and we bring them 2 meals 5 days a week. They get a friendly hello and a wellness check from our delivery drivers. We liaise with family members, emergency contacts, emergency services as needed, cross-reference their needs to other organizations like Village of Tacoma Park, for example. And our meals are cost efficient. A full year of our service costs less than a single overnight in the hospital, or 10 days of 10 days in an institution, for example. Our meal delivery program is shown to reduce falls and help people stay in their homes. So when people go to the hospital, even if they do, it's for a lesser reason than if they had not been getting good nutrition for an extended period of time. Our organization mentions Tacoma Park and Silver Spring in the name. Our service area includes both cities and a few zip codes in Prince George's, but Tacoma Park is our core. 40% of our daily clients, some 45 out of 120 clients, are TP residents. Tacoma Park has a significant senior population, just over 2,000 people. We know that 645 live alone, 417 have 2 or more disabilities, 249 have limited ability for independent living, 74 have limited ability for self-care. We have similar numbers for the adult population that are not seniors, and we estimate that there are some 450 neighbors in Tacoma Park who are eligible for our service. Now, a few seconds ago, I said that we serve 45 residents in Tacoma Park. We are addressing roughly 10% of the need. Meals on Wheels of Tacoma Park has the capacity and the will to grow. And I want you to know that when you support Meals on Wheels or Tacoma Park's mission, you are directly reducing the load on the healthcare system with a very simple solution: healthy food. I want to thank many of you who have come visited us in the past: Mayor Searcy, former Mayor Kate Stewart, Council members Fulcher, Gibson, Siemens. I know all of you have visited. The rest of you, please come visit us. I hope this brief intro has provided at least one new piece of info. Come see us at mounttacoma.org. And my name's Daniel Adams. Our executive director is named Ruth Masterson, ruth@mounttacoma.org. Thanks for the 3 minutes.
Thank you so much. And thank you for all that you do. Do we have any other general public comments this evening? Okay, do we have any virtual general public comments this evening?
Yes, me. Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, Jan, we can.
Thank you for coming back to me. I was muted, I didn't know it. I'm in Ward 3, and you know my name. I'm all for more housing, especially affordable housing, but this needs to be done right. Many questions need satisfactory answers. For starters, as to the many properties not protected by deed restrictions, is there any mechanism to prevent owners of new units from setting market rate unaffordable rents at the outset? Next question, where are the guardrails to prevent overreach? Like, for example, a mandated reduction or removal of the tax credit if the rents are set too high for non-restricted properties. Would the tax credit on top of the increased land value due to MMPA on Maple and Lee further incentivize the tear down of existing affordable housing? Next question. Developers cite high interest rates as one reason to demand relief, but interest rates are going down. Could the city use this to negotiate a better deal? At the very least, the city should postpone the vote and engage with residents in a collaborative problem-solving process for as long as it takes to satisfy constituents that the plan will avoid harmful unintended consequences, protect renters, and prioritize the needs of residents above all else. We do not want or need a plunge ahead and hope for the best approach to this very complex issue. 10 people testified at the last hearing. Of those, 8 opposed some aspect of this plan. And of course, we heard more opposition tonight. Please listen to the people who voted for you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Do we have any other general public comments?
We have one comment from Lauren Goldberg.
Great.
Hello, my name is Lauren Goldberg. I'm the Executive Director of Crossroads Community Food Network. I'm here to express gratitude to the Grants Review Committee for recommending that our proposal be funded. Let me tell you a bit about us. Founded in 2007 as a seasonal farmers market to bring local produce to a historically underserved area, Crossroads Farmers Market was the first market in Maryland to accept SNAP, WIC, and other federal nutrition benefits, and the first nationwide to launch a double-dollar program called Fresh Checks that matches the value of those benefits when spent at Crossroads Farmers Market. Crossroads has pioneered a choice-based model for food access. By connecting low-wealth shoppers directly with local farmers, we're putting the power back in the hands of community fostering a more equitable food system. The Fresh Checks program has grown significantly. In 2007, nearly $7,000 in incentives was distributed to 100 individuals, families, and seniors. In 2023, nearly 2,000 shoppers received more than $125,000 in Fresh Checks to reduce food insecurity. Over the last 18 seasons, roughly 26,000 individuals, families, and seniors spent over $1 million in federal nutrition benefits at Crossroads Farmers Market and received another $1 million in Fresh Checks dollars to spend on even more fresh fruits and vegetables. Many CFM shoppers are underemployed, highlighting the need for at least adequate paying jobs in our community. Further, systemic racism creates barriers to starting businesses for people who are Black, Brown, Indigenous, other people of color, as well as women and folks who have immigrated to our community. These barriers include limited access to loans, credit, business support, and land ownership. Crossroads Microenterprise Development Program provides low-wealth food entrepreneurs with skills and technical assistance in order so that they can run successful companies. And the Tacoma Park Silver Spring Community Kitchen, which we manage and is housed at the Tacoma Park Presbyterian Church, provides an affordable means of production. Together, the customized one-on-one support provided through these programs empowers minority and women food business owners to develop successful businesses, increase revenue, and create jobs in our community. In this way, Crossroads supports our neighbors as they increase self-sufficiency and reduce food insecurity for themselves and their families. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Do we have any other public comments this evening? No? Okay, great. So we're going to move into council comments. Councilmember Honzak.
I'm sorry.
No problem. Councilmember Gibson.
Sure. Thank you. Might take just a tad more than the 3 minutes I try and stay within. First of all, thanks to all the folks that came out and speak on the hearing. Ward 3, you are very well represented and you're heard. Hopefully by all of us, and heard by me. I really appreciate and agree with most all of the comments that were made with regard to the impact assessment or review, and in general the comments about our tax credit programs. I want to say it doesn't matter whether we call it a local housing crisis or a serious problem. Let's agree that a strong and prudent response is needed for select housing needs, and it is a priority. Let us also agree that due diligence requires that we seek to expand benefits while reducing costs and reducing the risks of unintended consequences. Ideally, we would ask for an independent professional review of each proposal's costs and risks. The fiscal impact analysis that we just got yet to get discussed, but only partially addresses those needs, and its flaws in that report were pointed out tonight. Regarding risk, let us remember that arguably our lack of new multifamily housing may be seen as an unintended consequence of an otherwise successful and progressive rent stabilization policy. So what are the central risks and costs of the new rental housing credits program that deserve more attention? I suggest the following. The risk that the type, quality, location, and price points of the new market rate housing may not serve our most critical needs or our social values. The risk that some residents may be displaced and buildings torn down under these credits. The risk that ongoing maintenance costs, operational costs for new city services over the 10 or 15-year forgiveness period may not be sufficiently covered and will be passed on to current property owners. The risk that forgiven property taxes won't be fully recouped in a timely manner, or if a project fails to fulfill its obligations. The high opportunity costs for the new rental housing subsidies that may reduce our ability to address other key challenges in our city, such as structural deficit, climate response, and other housing strategies pointed out. These risks deserve our due diligence and possible guardrails, such as the following: requiring a no displacement policy, increase the percent of affordable housing units required, decrease the tax credit forgiveness time from 15 to 10 years, reduce subsidies on select properties that may not need them, and add a sunset date or pause to review our impacts. I hope we can fully discuss these protections and any others that the council chooses over the next few council sessions. Thank you. Actually, I was 3 minutes off the nose.
You did good. Councilmember Small.
Thank you, Mayor. I appreciate the courtesy. I was sincerely going to give a statement today called Statesmen, Racemen, and Wonderkins. And the reason why I was going to do that, it just occurred to me, was a really clever sort of play on some structural political realities in the local area. But I think it probably returns back to why I know these three terms. And that's from the movie Eyes on the Prize. Documentary series about the civil rights movement over time, progress, those kinds of things. Invariably, when we talk about those kinds of things, and you talk about like eyes on the prize, that comes from, variety of traditions, but the effectiveness came when people started talking about whether or not what was happening was fair. And there's very good imagery in that documentary series about Martin Luther King saying, all we're asking you to do is prove what you say on paper. And that happens over and over again throughout the process. And then when you get to the end, and starts talking about statesmen and the concern in moving at a glacial pace for the benefit of the community. And then it turns to a discussion about the civil rights movement, its effectiveness. And then it turns to 68 people getting shot and whatever. And then it turns to the Wonderkins, which is a generation of people who came up with college degrees, who came and took on the government with their technical expertise, and were therefore supposed to fix everything. I only bring that up to say that I would argue that probably no one in here knew that I was talking about Eyes on the Prize. And maybe some of you didn't know that the statesman, raceman, wonderkins thing, because the raceman part of Jackie Robinson and Paul Robeson and all those things has gone over your heads as I've done it. But I would say this. A lot of the people who are saying these things about the policies that we have been pursuing for more than 2 years are probably a slice of that pie, could maybe deal with some humility about the way they approach the people who have to make these decisions and their cognitive capabilities, and could probably do well to remember that the Washington Adventist site is controlled by an educational religious entity that has its own designs for that don't have anything to do with your demands. And it's not fair to give us all of these problems when we don't know what they're doing because we don't have the right to know yet. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Small. Do we have any other council comments? Councilmember Fulcher.
Thank you. Sorry, lost my place. Just want to remind everybody that it's not just people that are able to come to this room that we're supposed to listen to as council members. Appreciate that, for instance, Lucy Moore is here. She's been here a couple times, depending on what's going on. And I know that if she were to be elected to office, she'd be here every night. But she has had other priorities in her life, taking care of 2 children. As I was walking out the door today, I got an email from a mother who said, she hadn't realized that she was copying me on something that she was sending to everybody else in the neighborhood about these tax credits. But she said that they weren't enough and that we needed to expand them, that 10 units was too many, and that they should be less than 10 units in order to get the tax credit. And so that's another side that we're hearing from. Before being elected, I was really focused on the need of affordable housing and thought that was the only thing that we should be supporting. And I have been convinced otherwise, that we need all types of housing here in Tacoma Park. And the two people that I've been hearing that from the most is from our first Black mayor of Tacoma Park and from the current mayor of Rockville, Monique Ashton, also a woman of color. I am in favor of us doing whatever we can to get some housing built here in Tacoma Park, as long as it's prudent. And I'm looking at people that are trying to keep our budget balanced as I say that. And that's what I'm hearing, is that the possible actual cost of doing this to the city is not going to be significant, and that we are going to be foregoing revenue, but that is what we're going to have to do in order to get these things built. As the mayor said last week, we've had other areas of land that have been available for quite some time to be built on, and nothing has happened. And so we need to do something, and we need to do something now. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Fulcher. Do you have any other public comments this evening? Okay, so I want to give a thank you to everyone that came out tonight to offer comments in terms of the housing credits. I'll save my comments for when we actually start talking about it on the agenda as an agenda item. But I do appreciate everyone's attention to the matter and your willingness to come out and offer your thoughts and your expertise regarding the three. I just want to make sure everybody understands there are three proposals that are before the council. One is about building new housing. One is about preserving the affordable housing that we have and making necessary upgrades. And then there's a third that's about reinvestment. And we'll talk more about those later in the agenda, but I do just want to make sure that folks are aware that there are multiple credits, two of which that can be stacked, and two of which work quite well for our landlords that are renovating some of our existing affordable housing. And I stand by my words. I think it's really important for us to make sure that everyone in our community are able to live with dignity in a place that they're proud of. And every single time I get a call about power being out, or rodents in a unit or units, or air conditioning not working, heat not working, I take it personally. So I feel like that's my job, to make sure that everyone in our community can live with dignity. So I want to thank everybody that came out tonight. Want to give a special thanks to the organizations that spoke thus far in terms of Meals on Wheels, and Crossroads, the food market that we have here in Crossroads Food Network. That has just been both have been such a valuable assets to our community. And I want to thank those that have come out in recognition of future funding from the city, but I've been able to see both for the Crossroads and Meals on Wheels firsthand the impact that they have to people in our community. And so I want to thank Daniel and Lauren for coming out and sharing about what you do, because I've seen it firsthand, and I see the smiles on people's faces when they're able to come to the farmers market, or they're able to see a friendly face at the door with their lunch. I also want to thank this weekend. I had a chance to do lots of talking. I want to thank the Tacoma Overlook and residents from the Hampshire Towers that took some time out this weekend to talk to myself, Delegate Moon, as well as Delegate Charkoudian, to talk more about some of the issues that they're facing in terms of condo community support, as well as rental housing, and making sure that we're able to work with some of our residents that live in the Overlook and the support that they need, as well as residents that are living in Hampshire Towers that wanted to express some of the issues that they're having. And so I appreciate the organizers for that event. It was really helpful for us to sit down and talk through some of the issues that people are facing. And also want to thank the Long Branch Community Association for the opportunity to speak to the residents there as well. So want to thank everyone for allowing me to come out and talk to folks on Sunday. And with that, I think we're going to move to actually one last thing, just so that everybody is aware, the council has received emails regarding a field trip that I believe might have happened at Tacoma Elementary. We've received emails regarding it. I want to make sure that people are aware that the City of Tacoma Park does not regulate the curriculum at the elementary schools. And so we do and have shared emails that we've received. The Montgomery County Council have received those emails. And also I've made sure to share that with members of the MCPS to make them aware of the emails that were received regarding a field trip to Cox Farms, a farm nearby. So just wanted to give folks a heads up that we did receive those emails in case anyone might have sent them, and that they have been shared with the appropriate governing body. And so with that, I will turn things over to our city manager for city manager comments.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of council, and guests. From the Housing and Community Development Department, the city's new facade improvement grant is now accepting applications. Grants reimbursable up to $10,000 are available to assist local businesses in repairing or improving their storefronts to encourage vibrant, welcoming commercial districts. Grant funds may be used for facade improvements such as new signage, awnings, windows, doors, or repair of the street-facing portions of the structure. Awards will be approved on a rolling basis until funds are depleted. Grant agreements must be signed by Friday, December 13th of this year, and funds must be spent and submitted for reimbursement by November 1st of 2026. For full details, including eligibility requirements and how to apply, please visit the Facade Improvement Grant webpage at the city's website. From the police department, join us in making a difference. We're collecting essential items for domestic violence shelters to support survivors on their journey to safety and healing. Your contribution can change lives. Let's stand together against domestic violence. We are now collecting through Friday, November 1st. In partnership with the Montgomery County Family Justice Center Foundation, Tacoma Park Police are collecting care packages and/or items to be donated to meet the immediate critical needs that directly impact the safety, wellness, and healing of a victim of domestic violence and/or their children. Emergency care packages provide brand new toiletries and personal care items for each survivor of domestic violence and their children who walk through the doors of the Family Justice Center to receive services. Brand new stuffed animals, games, toys, and books are also provided to every child who goes to the Family Justice Center. A complete list of items can be found on the city website. A link will be included tomorrow in the posted city manager's comments. The drop-off is until Friday, November 1st at the Tacoma Park City Building, first floor lobby, 7500 Maple Avenue, Tacoma Park. From the Public Works Department, the city plans to make repairs to the concrete patio area at B.Y. Morrison Pavilion Park, located at the juncture of Carroll Avenue and Ethan Allen Avenue. The work is expected to begin tomorrow, October 17th, and will take about a week. The parking area, EV chargers, and pavilion area will be closed to the public during the work. Signs have been posted around the area noting the planned work. We have also notified OTPA and the co-op and some of the businesses in the immediate area. From the Recreation Department, Monster Bash is Saturday, October 26th. Our events will commence with a bash kickoff at 1 p.m. at the Tacoma Park Middle School parking lot. The event is a great opportunity to visit with neighbors, family, and friends while having fun. Participate in our trunk or treat area and go table to table collecting goodies. This will be followed by the costume contest and parade, and we will end our program with an award ceremony and celebration along Maple Avenue. The parade will begin at approximately 2 p.m. on Piney Branch Road, and judging will occur during the parade itself. We will then walk down Piney Branch Road to Philadelphia Avenue, turn left, then to Maple Avenue for the award ceremony and a fabulous concert. Prizes awarded for most original, cutest, and scariest costumes in the following age groups: ages 4 and under, ages 5 to 8, ages 9 to 12, teens and adults, and an overall group award. And finally, from the City Manager's Office, this week's staff shout-out is for our own Donna Wright. Donna, would you please come forward? Thank you. In order to spend more time with friends and family and pursue the next chapter in her career, our communications director, Donna Wright, is retiring from her position with Tacoma Park after many years of service. With her hallmark humility in her notification letter to me, Donna wrote of her heartfelt gratitude to her entire team and city staff. Donna said, "Their support, dedication, and unwavering commitment have been instrumental to my collective success, and I deeply appreciate the opportunity to work alongside such remarkable individuals. Your collaboration and tireless effort have helped make a meaningful impact on our community, ensuring that we consistently provide trusted, high-quality information about city projects and programs. Being part of a team that exemplifies hard work and dedication has been a true honor." As to her next chapter, Donna wrote, "I will carry forward the invaluable lessons and experiences I've gained here. I wish the organization and the community all the very best." Pushing through Donna's humility for a moment, I simply cannot overstate her many accomplishments during her tenure and the value she has provided to all of us personally and professionally. Donna is among the very best communications professionals with whom I have had the pleasure to work during my entire city management career. Donna's final day will be this Friday, October 18th. And Donna, Deputy City Manager Andrew Bolick, and her team have devised a transition plan to ensure limited interruptions to the city's communications touch points and programs. Again, on behalf of all of us, thank you, Donna, for everything, and please accept our heartfelt gratitude for all that you've done and for best wishes for the future.
Thank you. Thank you. Appreciate it very much. Thank you. I just wanted to thank you all each for just a moment. Thank you for your continued support of my communications department. And to Deputy City Manager Eubanks, I'd like to thank you for your insightful and thoughtfulness and guidance during the time of me being a director. And to my direct manager, Deputy City Manager Andrew Boldock, I want to take a moment to express my deep gratitude for your continued guidance and the time you generously invested in me. Your insights have been invaluable, and I truly believe your skills and leadership as a manager and as a person are priceless. Your impact on both my professional growth and team success cannot be overstated. And I wish to thank my communications department of the City TV, newsletter, radio show, communication specialist, and not to mention the webmaster. And I wish to, I'm in all of them every single day. They are so committed, so loyal, so creative, and they continue to believe in the trusted source and sharing information for all. And for that, I'm really thankful. And there are many people in the city that have helped gain our success. And Kathy Plevy and Roz Grisby, Jesse Carpenter. I don't want to forget anybody. I just have a couple. And Lori Cannon, Susan Chang, Z Abyss, Lars DeSavio, Debbie Huffman, Jessica Jones for their support and dedication and unwavering commitment to our department. And I also wish to thank all of the entire finance department who quietly does their job in passing payroll and processing all of our accounting and invoicing, and they do it, quite frankly, for everyone. And it's with little thanks and very little recognition, and I like to thank them all for that. As I move on to the next chapter of my career, I will take all of this invaluable lessons that I've learned from each and every one of you and carry it forward. And again, thank you for the opportunity. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Well, I just want to say that I am so grateful to Donna for all of the work that you've done, not only for the city, but for each and every one of us. You kept me straight, and I don't know how I'm gonna do it. Where am I supposed to speak? I don't know. And you are always just so attentive and definitely committed to the residents of Takoma Park. So you are a true asset to our community, and your presence will be felt. And we wish you the best in what lies ahead for you. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Councilmember DeBala?
We're going to miss you.
All right, Councilmember Small.
I defer.
You're next up.
All right. Well, I would like to say something very specific to Debbie and the communications staff about dedication and recognition. Because dedication is something that you see borne out in the actions of the people that you see every day. And that is often done under unfair, unreasonable, and hostile circumstances. And that's how you can prove that you're dedicated. Recognition comes usually too late, and oftentimes the people that choose to recognize people have done their fair share to make sure that that person didn't receive recognition for their actions before. So I just wanted to unequivocally say to you, also as a person who used to do municipal government work as a professional at a senior level, that I am unbelievably impressed with the amount of effort that you have put into both your efforts with print media and digital media and these wonderful people that you have marshaled under your guidance to stay here and listen to people like me prattle on. So I just wanted to tell you that I am as upset about this particular departure as a person could be, but I am happy for your future as a person who will soon receive what you amply deserve.
Thank you, Councilmember Small. Councilmember Gibson?
Donna, thank you. You went beyond the call of duty to help me do something innovative. We got a survey out to Ward 3, and we got 400 respondents, and we got answers to budget questions that were important for me to learn from. And I was a neophyte. You know, what did I know about surveys? You helped me, and behind the scenes did so much. I am immensely grateful for the opportunity to work with you and for the contribution that you made to me and to Ward 3 with in particular that survey, but overall, just thank you very, very much.
Thank you, Councilmember Gibson. Councilmember Fulcher.
Thank you. I want to thank you for your kindness and warmth. I feel like you really set the tone for the people that you've been leading, and it's always a pleasure to deal with you and anybody else in your department. So thank you.
Well, thank you again, Donna. You will be missed, and I hope there's cake. When is is there going to be something? Is there going to be cake? When is it going away? Where's?
Yeah.
Last day is on Friday.
Yeah, that was today at 3.
Ah,
We ate all the cake too, sorry.
you ate all the cake too? Gosh.
He's not even sorry about it.
Well, I will be sure to stop by and give you my hugs before your last day on Friday, but thank you so much. All right, so we are moving into our first work I am so tongue-tied today. Our first work session this evening, which is the Food Insecurity Grant recommendations.
Sorry,
The two of us.
which one? What is, can you?
Oh, food, yeah. Food and security reduction. It's that one. Yep.
This one, yeah.
Terrific. Okay, so just the arrows.
Right here.
Great. Perfect. Thank you. All right. Okay. You guys ready? Or awesome. Okay. So I'm Lucy Moore, again, a resident of Ward 3. I'm here in this capacity as co-chair of the city's Grants Review Committee. So our typical role is that we review the Community Quality of Life Grant, which is an annual grant for more kind of enrichment type work. There's a range of things that grant addresses. But we were tapped by you all to support the review of this food insecurity reduction grant series. And so what I'll be sharing tonight is the recommendations of that committee. So to start with essentially the challenge that these grants are intended to address, I wanted to take a moment to share some information from the Capital Area Food Bank. So since the start of the pandemic, they've been releasing an annual hunger report. And in their latest edition, they flagged that not only is food insecurity a significant problem, but it is a problem that continues to be on the rise. So even though many aspects of life have resettled after the start of COVID and lockdown, food insecurity has not gotten better. The problem's only gotten worse. So in the greater DC area, the Capital Area Food Bank has found that 37% of households have experienced food insecurity in the last year. They then break it down by municipalities. So Montgomery County is at 34%, which is still, over a third. We don't have specific numbers for Tacoma Park, but we took a look at the breakdown that the Capital Area Food Bank provides that correlates rates of food insecurity to income ranges and compared that to Tacoma Park income ranges. And we're likely to be right there at that same 37% as the larger DC area, if not more. So just to put that, to give that a little more numbers, that means 2,455 households in Tacoma Park. Obviously that's an estimate, but that's a lot of households. So more than 1 in 3. And then this is the hunger report has a number of really helpful graphics just for understanding the scale and impact. I wanted to share this one just to take a moment to think about the ways in which food insecurity only reinforce the racial inequity in greater DC, but certainly in Tacoma Park, there's no reason why we would be any different. So food insecure households are more likely to be African American or households of color. About 40% of them are households with children. So that means children who are growing, who are extra vulnerable and extra in need of proper nutrition are vulnerable. And then they also have a number of data points around income and education, which indicate that that because the problem's growing, like just having a degree, just even having really a middle-class income doesn't necessarily protect a household from experiencing food insecurity because costs are rising so many ways. So it's a daunting problem and one that's very much relevant to our city's interest in addressing racial equity. So to get to what Tacoma Park is doing about it, under your leadership, the city put out a call for grants to address food insecurity. And so here outlines sort of some of the basic elements of that call. So the goal is to provide financial support to a range of programs that help to reduce food insecurity among residents in Tacoma Park. We were allotted about $215,000, and that's funding that's coming from ARPA, from the American Rescue Plan Act. There's a range of ways it can be applied, but applicants have to be a nonprofit or business, have to demonstrate that 75% of the beneficiaries of their program are city residents, and then the grant awards range from $10,000 to $30,000. So that was set so that they knew kind of what type of program to be applying with. And in this case, there's no match required. For the Community Quality of Life grant, there is a match requirement. In this case, there's not. So we had 11 applicants total. 8 of them were new to any of the grant programs that the city has. The total requested was well above the amount we had allotted. So you can see here that proportion. So our committee's task was to review those and make the determination about what to do with the available funding. So just to take a step back on the committee itself, this is our current membership or our current committee roster. This is the smaller end of where we've been as a committee. We can have up to 9 members. So if you all know anyone who you think would be a good fit for this committee, please send them our way. Send them to Patty Mallon, our staff person. I think in January, you all might be scheduled to review new committee appointments. So it would be great to, before the holiday rush, start to talk to some people about what that could look like. And as you can see from the breakdown of wards, we've got strong representation from Ward 3 and Ward 1, and then 1 representative from Ward 2. So obviously it'd be really critical to get some representation from Ward 4, 5, and 6. We've had that in the past, but I'd like us to have that representation again. I think that's really critical. So in terms of the process that in terms of our review process, this was a process that was facilitated by city staff that our committee undertook. The city has a great grants review interface, so we were provided with the applications and with a structured interface that allowed us to provide a quantitative evaluation of the grants, evaluating their impact, feasibility, equity, and capacity. And then Patty very graciously combined all the scores, helped us sort of get a umbrella level picture of what we were looking at. And then we walked through more of a qualitative process where we discussed our understanding of the different applications, which seemed to basically the qualitative step is to not just say, okay, here are the numbers, here are the scores, and here's the cutoff line, but to say like, okay, here's the range. What did those numbers mean? We each had a chance to talk about the different ways in which we thought about this. I just note that, for example, some folks really took an approach of wanting to see like sustainability brought out in some of the programs or things that were about a more sustainable long-term goal. Others of us felt very strongly that we wanted to fund the projects that got food out immediately. And so it was helpful to talk through, even though we had this shared framework in our review, that we brought different ideas to it and it gave us space to evaluate that. So then we worked through that to make the recommendations that you'll see today. So this is the list of organizations and the projects that they're proposing. And on the right is the recommended award. I believe we have a small adjustment to the recommended award amount that Patty and other members of staff perhaps will be following up with you on. We've had a small amount of funding come available from another grant pool. So the additional funding will go to the same pool you see here for the same projects, all within the grant range that we established. But you can see from this list some familiar names. So Meals on Wheels, thank you very much for coming out and sharing the work you do. So they've received grant fundings in the past and are again one of the recipients for this grant. pending your approval. Small Things Matter is another program that we funded in the past and recommend funding again. We also have the Adventist Community Services of Greater Washington, D.C. So I have seen this as a way of our city continuing to connect with partners that we've built relationships with, but then also grow. So some of these are groups that, there are a few that are groups that I knew from the Community Quality of Life grant and applied for different kinds of things. So What Else, for instance, has applied in the capacity of providing enrichment and aftercare. But here they're aligning their food distribution with Tacoma Park Elementary School. So they're combining their presence within the schools to provide a quick access to food. So most of them are more in the food pantry model. There are variations on that, like the direct delivery that Meals on Wheels provides. The Adventist program is specifically focusing on providing essentially a food pantry structure, but directed at mothers and children who often really struggle to have their needs met at your typical food pantry. There are at least one or two that are specifically targeting at making sure that their food distribution is culturally appropriate to their recipients. And then the last two I'd flag as being slightly different in that the Crossroads Community Food Network program is something of a workforce development, or has a workforce development angle. Its proposal is to work with the to work with the folks who come to the farmers market, at the Crossroads Farmers Market, and essentially have their own businesses that aren't necessarily up to code or aren't official, but are still an active presence at that market, to work with them, to work them through some of the licensure processes, make sure they're meeting the standards that are required, somewhat like the community kitchen, but this is taking it to people who are vendors already out in the market, and to help sort of bridge that gap. So that's a different spin than more of the strict food distribution. And then also we have the Community Food Forest Collective. They're a recipient of our Community Quality of Life grant as well. And their funding is for an expansion of their community food forests, which is both about growing and producing food, but also about the educational component around gardening and developing native food forests. And I think that is it for us. So please let me know if you have any questions. And again, I'll put in a plug, send folks our way. We need a few more committee members, especially from 4, 5, and 6. So put in a good word for us with your constituents.
Great, thank you so much. Councilmember Siemens.
Thank you, Mayor. I have to recuse myself from this discussion since my wife works for one of these organizations.
That's fair. That is very fair. Thank you very much, Councilmember Siemens. Councilmember Small.
Thank you, Mayor. I think you have done the yeoman's work on this committee, and the Skeletons Committee that you guys have run to get these grants through and managed in an efficient manner with the new matrix that we have done has been excellent. As a citizen and public servant, as citizen, you should feel good about yourself. Now, stating anything else in the future. I have a question about the cheer grant, and I know that some of them are here, and so I'm curious about what is meant or intended by culturally appropriate food distribution. So that's
It's appropriate if someone wants to do it. I don't want to put you on the spot either. You can say, well, but please. Okay, terrific. Thank you.
My name is Gimbogish. I'm an outreach specialist for CHEER. Our program is especially culturally appropriate food insecurities, like in our community, especially and Ethiopians, we are unique in culture and religion, and we're isolated, and they are not really using this food distribution, and because of the religion and so many things. So because of this, we are strategizing based on their needs so that they feel equally, they feel like secured, and when they're going to their stores, they can pick their own food, and then they'll be feeling like included, because we have people that in the critical time, they don't want to eat that canned food, which in the box they throw it, and then they suffer in food insecurity. And that's why we really created and initiated a new approach to address security communities, especially in Tacoma Park, Tacoma City, and that's we have different strategies. If you have questions, I can respond.
No, I think that based on what you said, my understanding of the community and some food restrictions, dietary restrictions, that I was curious. Culturally appropriate as a catch-all term, and now I know, and I think it is a great idea.
Yeah. They just went to their stores, their culturally stores, they just pick their own food. We have the monitoring strategies, and we have the follow-up strategies on that. The way we also can create connection, interactions, all those and other programs to empower the community and the immigrants who are really concentrated in Tacoma City.
No, and I appreciate that, and I regard that as really important. Last week, one of the things was my colleague was talking about institutionalizing poverty in Tacoma Park by some of the rules and restrictions and populations that live here, and kind of the perfect storm they're in. So I appreciate what you guys are doing.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Councilmember Small.
Point of order, may I interject, Mayor, just because I was going to ask her a question.
Sounds like you might have a question.
You may have another
Or
question.
just, I could just make a comment. I just, is it
No, go
okay?
ahead.
Okay. I just wanted to say, thank you for that question, Councilmember Small. I think that we have had a lot of experience in the last few years throughout COVID, especially the prior council, and food distribution programming that's been made possible by the ARPA funding. And we can see how many different food distribution points there are across, I know at least I've seen them up close and personal in Ward 5. And CHEER has been, in and around a lot of the areas where I am. And I would invite you to come back, please. I encourage you to come back and share some of those lessons with us about what you're finding when you try. I don't know if these will be pilot programs that you're running on food distribution, but I hope that the council will be able to learn from what you're seeing. I know that you all also have some gardening programs working with a lot of people from Hispanic cultural backgrounds, and we would really welcome, I think, learning about what might work better than the status quo if you're seeing that. I know that Crossroads does a lot of really good work multiculturally with our different groups, so thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Honzak. Councilmember Small, I think that's an old light. Councilmember DeBala?
Yes, it is. Sorry.
No worries. Councilmember DeBala?
Yes, thank you and the rest of the committee for all the work to sort through this and make some tough recommendations. These are all great proposals, and I really appreciate it. And to those of you in the room who are doing the work, thank you. I have two specific questions about two specific groups. So what else? Are they trying to expand into Tacoma Park, or do they already work at the elementary school? And if so, does anybody know? Wait, it says, never mind, it says 60 to-go bags on a weekly basis. So is that bi-weekly basis? So is that new, or is that continuing? That's new.
That's they model that same program at other schools
Right.
within Montgomery County. This would bring them into Tacoma Park and include Tacoma Park Elementary to do that same model they've used elsewhere.
Great. And then the other question has to do with Educare support services. Do we know how many residents or sites they have in Tacoma now? And again, are they trying to enter Tacoma or expand? Because it sounds great. I just, this one doesn't have a number, and most of them do.
Come on.
There he is.
Terrific. Okay. I was going to say, if we don't have the answer, we can get it to you, but even better.
Yeah, we're getting the answer right now.
Good evening. I'm Don Rick Thomas. I'm the founder and the CEO for Educare. We've been in Tacoma Park since 2012. and we serve over 200 individuals in Tacoma Park. And Miss Jessie Carpenter, who've been working with since 2012, knows a lot about the program. So we're not new.
So where are your host sites in Tacoma?
We serve about 112 individuals at the Franklin.
At the Franklin.
Franklin, and we serve 15 at Essex House, and Hampshire Towers. I think we have about 12, and we have scattered sites in Tacoma Park. So we've been doing from 12 years. We've been doing door-to-door delivery.
That's great. Thank you.
Yeah. And Mayor Sasse will definitely welcome you to come visit.
I would love to. I would love to.
Yeah.
I will be there. You give me an invite, I'm there.
Definitely. I've heard a lot about you, so it'll be good to meet you.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Okay, Councilmember DeBala, you're done with your questions? Councilmember Fulcher.
Thank you. I just want to thank you and the rest of the people that are on your committee, because I know that this wasn't originally sort of the grant work that you guys signed up for. And it's really great that you took this on, especially as we were kind of pulling back on having as many of the other grants that we have in the city. So it's really great that you guys are helping with this. So thank you.
Councilmember Gibson.
Yeah, well, thanks to all of the folks that are doing this good work. I've always felt that when we can leverage our civic infrastructure here, we're so much better as a community. I'm remembering, Lucy, that with the quality of life grants, that the application process, I think, onerous was maybe the word that was used. So is it a different process? Was this done differently?
So the applications were different. The review process that we followed was very similar.
Yeah.
But I think for the quality of life grant, it asks for a lot, and the maximum funding is $10,000 and often is less than that.
Yeah.
And it is more of a known established grant. That doesn't mean we don't need to do due diligence, or that when we have new recipients, we want to make sure we've got all the documentation. But this is it was a different need, a different set of requirements. Still relatively extensive. It did what it needed to do, but I do think this was a somewhat more efficient because it was targeted, and then also appropriately sized because the funding amount was higher. I would be interested to hear, not tonight, but to hear from the recipients, because I do think that's a feedback loop we want to make sure we have in general. But as someone reviewing the documentation, it felt more proportionate to the funds.
Good to hear. And then presumably there's a similar sort of reporting requirement and about after it's over to make sure, for us to learn what good work was done, et cetera.
Yes.
Yes. Great. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Gibson. I just want to thank the committee and thank you, Patty, for all of the hard work that you all have put in. I know that between writing different grants and reviewing all of the grants that we have within the city, there's a lot of work that's happening. And it could not be done without our committee and without the work that Patty Malin has been doing for the city. So I just want to thank you all so much. And I also, I'm familiar with quite a few of these organizations. I've had an opportunity to either bag food or serve food for a number of them. I know that Small Things Matter gives out 200 bags of produce to Tacoma Park Elementary and Piney Branch Elementary for a total of 400 bags of food each month. And so I'm happy to see that they're there. One of the things that I do think would be helpful, and I don't know how we would go about doing this, and I don't know what I think this kind of piggybacks off of Councilmember Gibson's questions around the reporting requirements, because one of the big things that was a challenge during ARPA, there were so many food distributions, and there was not food left, right? So there were people who were in need of food, but we just did not have a firm handle on how to identify the needs. So like, for example, if I see Educare has some seniors in Essex House, and then we have the food pantry at Essex House, and then there's a possibility of entities like a Small Things Matter doing a food distribution. It really would be helpful for us to get a firmer handle on how some of these organizations are, I don't want to say overlapping because you're not, but you're complementing where one isn't in a building on a Tuesday, another one may be. And then that way we're providing this overarching network of food for some of our food insecure residents. And it would be helpful for me to start to kind of see how those pieces fit together. And I think it would be really helpful too if we as a city are trying to explore other funding sources for these types of grants in the future, understanding better how our community, what the gaps in service and needs are, and how these grants fill them, and how, hey, if you give us more money, we could do a lot more to fill these other gaps. So it'd be really, really useful. So thank you all so much for doing all of this work, and I look forward to hearing more about the great things that all of our grantees will be doing with the funds.
Well, and if you don't mind, just to respond a bit to that, I am in total agreement, and I think our committee similarly feels like it's been helpful when we have relationships where we've had a sense of the impact, being able, this is a different type of grant. In this instance, this is the last tranche of ARPA funding. I know you all know that. But you can see from the audience here the partnerships that this ARPA flurry has developed. And so I absolutely would love to see our committee, and it's all the more so because we have a terrific staff person that is full-time. She is doing grants out and in, so we're not her only job. But I do think between the staff settling, and this sort of nexus of having this last ARPA funding, but then looking to the fact that the problem is not going away, that the partners are still here. I'd say anecdotally, we heard from some applicants like, this money is great, but it's not enough. So, the need is going to continue. Even I appreciate you noting that there may be some overlap, but it's cumulatively beneficial, and understanding that is really valuable. So I'm excited for our committee to hopefully sort of help to connect some of these things, make sure we're connected with the partners, hearing about their experience with the application, understanding their impact. But not if we're going to do that, we're going to do that. But the only way that is going to then be useful is if we do have that continued funding. And as you all know, with ARPA ending, like that funding structure is gone. I hear you talking about new grants. I'll be happy to keep talking with Patty about what that might look like. But I do just want to flag, as you all shift into your FY26 budget planning, the funding structure may change, but the need is there. And I think this is a city that values its commitment to all of its members, including those at the most extreme margins. So I'd like to just put in a plug for thinking about ways to make sure we can keep doing this kind of funding, and then we'll do our part to make sure we're building on those relationships and collecting that information to be doing it smartly. Thank you for giving me another moment to talk on this. And I'll pass all your kind words on to our committee. It's a great group, so thank you very much.
Awesome. Thank you. All right. So with that, again, thank you everyone for your work on the food insecurity reduction grants. We're going to take a 10-minute break, and then we will get started with the tax credit proposal work session. All right. Thank you all for indulging us as we transition to the latest work session. Well, it's actually not the latest. It's the one before the last one. The proposed housing tax credits. And so with that, just trying to drag my feet a little bit while I wait for a couple of council members. Excellent. So we're going to turn things over to our housing manager, Mr. McNally, who will be walking us through the Tacoma Park renewal housing tax credit fiscal analysis discussion with our consultants.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of council. Excited to be here tonight to talk about our 3 proposed tax credits tonight. Our starting piece tonight is the fiscal impact analysis done on the new rental housing tax credit, and I'll be turning it over to Mary Burkholder from BAE Economics in just a moment. I do have a few quick remarks. So with this, what we're trying to do with the new rental housing tax credit is make an investment in the housing that will serve our community over the next 30 plus years. And so what we're trying to do is enable and put that choice. In many of our sites, there's different options that are available to build. Commercial real estate, other potential build outs. And so we're also trying to turn the key a little bit and nudge them towards housing. As is well documented, we have a need for housing across the entire United States. Mary Burkholder and her team at BAE are an award-winning urban economics and real estate firm, and they've done analysis for cities and counties nationwide. They have worked on a high-level fiscal analysis, and what they were looking at here is testing our financial tool that we have, which is that new rental housing tax credit. So what we did as part of that was create a hypothetical highest potential build out. So this is a very conservative estimate meant to provide the full range of kind of what could happen. So we don't anticipate this to be the likely scenario or even a realistic scenario of build out, but we wanted to present that full range. I briefly want to point out a quick number that is part of the report, which is $18,828 per unit. What that represents is the per unit potential cost of the tax credit in foregone revenue. What that represents is roughly 3 to 4% of the total cost of a unit to build, based on conversations with developers. So with that in mind, I would like to turn it over to Mary and her team to walk you through the analysis, what they did, and some of their findings. Mary.
Good evening. I'm Mary Burkholder, and I am a principal at BAE Urban Economics. And Devin, you can go right to the next slide. Thank you. What I'll be covering tonight is a little bit about BAE, a little bit more than Devin told you, because I'm sure that the firm is unfamiliar to you. It's a small firm, but we have been around quite a long time. And a little bit about the assignment that we were given, which Devin described some, and then what we looked at were area multifamily housing trends, And then Tacoma Park multifamily housing market trends, and then some analysis conclusions. Next slide. So that BAE is a national urban economics firm. We have won a lot of awards. We have 6 offices across the country. We're based in Berkeley, California, and have been around since 1986. I lead the office that's in Washington, D.C. Since 1986, we've done some 2,600 client engagements. Most of our clients are public agencies, 80 to 85%, then some nonprofit organizations and financial institutions. We rarely do work for developers unless we see a public benefit in that. And those are typically the public-private type partnerships. We will help the developer figure out the best way to meet that public benefit. And some of the services that we provide in our practice areas include fiscal and economic impact analysis, market and financial feasibility analyses, affordable and workforce housing, and development advisory services. And that latter part is a development advisory service. We often advise the public sector on the best way to navigate public-private partnership or P3 type deals, which you might be familiar with. There are a lot of transit-oriented development and those kinds of real estate deals. Next. So our assignment here, as Devin mentioned, we performed an independent fiscal analysis for the city of Tacoma Park of the proposed rental housing tax credit. This analysis includes a review of the housing market conditions. We also looked at housing development capacity, the impacts of the tax credit to property owners, and then we looked at multifamily housing growth projections, and then foregone city property tax revenue. Next. So looking at the area multifamily trends, there's some things that really are important to state here. Having heard some of what others spoke of earlier in the evening. Multifamily development growth has slowed throughout the region. You can see that in almost everywhere. The number of new multifamily units has been down, and you can even see that beginning in 2014. There were a lot more. This is Montgomery County, and this shows you that there. That where we are. They picked up a little bit post-pandemic because things were held for a bit, but it's been mostly a downward trend in growth. Since 2000, Montgomery County has experienced a decrease in multifamily construction permits. And if you check out figure 6 in the report, that one shows that. And just in 2023, the county issued 59 townhouse permits. It seems there are more permits going for townhouses than they are for multifamily permits. And that's been a trend for the last few years. And that looks like 59 last year, 9 multifamily, and that looks like 2024 is looking to be about similar in that we have the data through the third quarter of 2024. Multifamily development is difficult, has been increasingly difficult due to high construction costs, and construction costs have you've seen some really considerable construction cost increases, something like 26% increases just since 2019. Some aspects, steel, for example, increased 65% in that time period. So that is something that you hear a lot about. And then of course the interest rates, I know you know that have been rising. We have gotten one small interest rate. We got one interest rate decrease, and we will likely see more, but that has been high interest rates have been an issue also, because as you probably can guess, any multifamily development, any larger multifamily development in particular, is very expensive, and the financing part is tough, and much tougher with higher interest rates. So I do know quite a few developers in the area, primarily because I was formerly the director of the Community Development Administration, which is Maryland's housing finance agency. So I know a lot of affordable housing developers because I've seen reviewed their proposals to get the tax credits from the state of Maryland. And a lot of the affordable developers are also market rate developers, or they were affordable and now they mostly just do market rate. But in any case, I know quite a few. And also we've done a lot of pro forma feasibility analysis of specific projects. We didn't have, this is not, as Devin mentioned, we did a hypothetical here to show you potential impact of a scenario that would be possible. But because I know some area developers and we've done a lot of analysis in the district in Northern Virginia and a little bit in Montgomery County, I have talked to them and actually just talked to them recently in 2023 when we were doing a large analysis of a large development at Navy Yard done by Brookfield that included apartments and some retail. And two developers that I talked to mentioned one major problem, which is the return on cost for multifamily development has really plunged. And which that means is that makes it really hard to do deals. And they said that it actually, just in the period from 2019 to 2023, their return on cost, and I got this from two different developers, similar ranges, probably competitors to some degree, but 11 to 13% in 2019 was their typical return on cost. In 2023, it was 7 to 9%. So I think it's, you can guess in the two, just by the way, the two that I spoke with were Bizzuto and Somerset. So you may be familiar with them. They do a lot of both do a lot of development in the area. And then what they also said is that both said that they were becoming more and more cautious. That partly explains why there's been a downward trend in multifamily development, because there are just deals that they can't do, and even deals that they committed to that were difficult to do, but they pressed on and did them because they had gone so far in the process. It takes years to build a multifamily development and to go through the development process. There are a lot of, and most jurisdictions, it is difficult in Montgomery County. In a sense, I think it takes a long time, but it's difficult anyway to get through a development process with the type of development that you'd see with the multifamily. And what they also said is that they look and need some type of incentive to do development. The project that I mentioned to you in DC, which is a lot of what you've seen in DC now with some of the multifamily that's gone in, they needed tax increment financing to be able to do that deal. And they wouldn't probably do it without tax increment financing. So the next slide. It's looking at Tacoma Park, the existing conditions in Tacoma Park. Tacoma Park only has 2,800, just over 2,800 multifamily housing units right now. And 2,446 of those are located in properties with 10 or more units. Tacoma Park's multifamily housing inventory hasn't really grown in recent years. I mean, we're trying to track what it was. We think that actually the last one occurred in the 1970s. But we've heard 40 years, we've heard 20 years, we've heard 30 years, but from what we can tell, it looks like it was the 70s. Tacoma Park has a multifamily vacancy rate of 3.1%, which is quite low. It's half the county's rate, which is around 6.1%. And real estate professionals consider vacancy rates that are below 5%, which, as you can tell from this graphic here, which takes us through quarter 3 2024, for the last, since 2023, that rate has been under 3% since the end of 2023. So they would look at that and they say that area, that's an indicator of unmet demand. So there is demand for housing. But as we said before, these deals can be difficult and not a guarantee that there's somebody out there wanting to do the types of deals out there right now. Next. So our conclusions on this, Tacoma Park has high demand for multifamily rental housing. That's evidenced by both population growth and low vacancy rates. The demand has not been met with new multifamily rental housing production. There have been no new units produced in decades. Tacoma Park's multifamily rental housing development capacity is constrained really by existing land use patterns and site availability, to some extent as well to rent stabilization and inclusionary zoning policies, the moderately priced dwelling unit requirements from the county. If current housing market conditions continue without housing policy intervention, we don't anticipate that there would be new rental housing units to be produced. The highest potential increase to Tacoma's multifamily rental housing inventory is definitely, as has been pointed out, the redevelopment of the former Washington Adventist Hospital site. And assuming the absorption of 1,285 multifamily rental units, and we use that number, again, a hypothetical, but that number came from Montgomery County staff who had the major minor tax, the plan in mind when they told us that number, that they said it was a reasonable assumption, aggressive, but a reasonable assumption to use as a hypothetical. We estimate that the new rental housing tax credit for that number of units would result in $24,194,382 in foregone property tax revenue for the next 30 years, and that is $18,828 per unit. But on the other side of it, we estimate that the city would collect $27,559,685 in additional revenue for the next 30 years, which was approximately $21,369. And I want to make one other point. Any development at the Washington, the hospital Adventist site would be subject to the MPDU requirements, and so that would be 15% of the units would be. And again, there's a calculation that's done on every single proposal, but it probably would be in the range of 190. Under this scenario, 192 units would be affordable to households with at 70% of area median income. And that concludes my presentation, but I'd be happy to take questions.
Great. Can I ask a clarifying question? First, thank you so much for sticking with us tonight.
Sure.
We got some feedback. Some residents might have raised a question about taking into account the MMPA, and it sounds like based on the second to last bullet that we base the assumption of absorption of 1,285 units based on the MMPA. Is that correct?
I believe so, yes.
Yeah, so when we developed this in conjunction with BAE, one of the things that we talked about was being conservative in terms of what's kind of the highest potential number of units that could come in all at once to show the range. What we were trying to establish was that range of fiscal impact, right? From no fiscal impact if nothing gets built to everyone comes in all at once. And so obviously the site with the highest potential is the Washington Adventist Hospital site. And so based on that, we said, assume a very aggressive build out. And so with that, that was the basis for this analysis.
Okay, so it basically assumes the most aggressive build out at Washington Adventist based on the MMPA.
Correct.
Okay. So would you say that that assumption, because, for example, the city has, this is a citywide policy, right? So do you all think that that assumption made sense from the perspective of a citywide approach for max build out, given what you know of the market and what could potentially exist? Like, did it make sense to focus on that 1285, assuming Washington Advantage site is probably maybe the first possible? Okay.
So I'll do that, and I'll let Mary jump in with kind of some of the clarifications on the technical details. So we relaxed a lot of assumptions with this because we were trying to look at a very clear test of the tool instead of necessarily let's kick every single site. One of the things that's pointed out in the report is we have, existing conditions on the ground. And so there are various sites that may potentially use it and may not. And that is a very big if. There's a lot of uncertainty, partially due to ownership of the site, where the site is located, what are the competing uses. This report is not aimed at any of that. We are talking about fiscal impacts to revenue. And so for that, we wanted to present a very clean analysis of what those impacts are, particularly breaking it down to a per unit basis so that we could have some idea of what that range could be. So for example, with that per unit basis, if we said 200 units get developed, we could see something in the range of $3.8 million in foregone revenue. What we're trying to do here is just test the tool and provide kind of what that range at its maximum width could be. What its realistic width is much more likely on the lower end.
Okay, thank you for that. Councilmember Gibson?
Just to follow up on that, and then, so on this number here, is at the maximum for the hospital site or for the city?
The maximum for this hypothetical scenario is the hospital site.
The hospital site, okay.
Yep.
So, so also in terms of clarification, and I don't know whether Ms. Burkholder heard the conversation earlier, the public comments, but the question was having to do with the two scenarios, the one scenario as is or status quo versus the scenario with the tax credits. And I guess the question that several residents raised, and I did, the assumption that, I guess, how much information do we have and was the consulting firm privy to in terms of the progress, steps, interest that's already been expressed by Washington Adventist in terms of going ahead, and they've had, I know they've had some kind of planning processes going on. And so if they have had some planning processes going on, and the MMPA has come into play, the idea that there is absolutely no possibility, or zero, I forget the exact language that was used in the analysis, seems out of place. In other words, there is some possibility, is there not, given the kind of interests, steps, scenarios that the Washington Adventist has already shown. So what were you able to share with the consultant?
Yeah, so I think it's an interesting question, right? With the Washington Adventist, the one thing I always say kind of with development is everyone paints a picture, and until you get their planning application, you don't exactly know what they're going to do. The site as Zone 4, and we've shared with them a lot about the MMPA and kind of the zoning on the site, is commercial residential mixed use. So they could do fully residential, which is what this hypothetical looks at, because we are focused right now on a tool to incentivize housing production. They could also do full commercial and do no residential housing. And so, for example, in this tool, what we're trying to do with these property owners is A, incentivize new housing production on sites that might allow for additional housing, but also B, on sites where there are competing potential uses that could be developed, let's nudge them towards building housing that meets the needs of our current and future residents.
So again, could you, what information was provided to the consultants? I mean, I guess one of the questions following up on what you just said is there a sense that there is a greater feasibility for commercial versus residential? In other words, do we need to nudge it forward towards or not residential, but multifamily versus commercial? Is that option the MMPA allows? Do we think, or do the analysts think that there is a greater likelihood for commercial development there than there is for multifamily housing?
So I want to be clear about the scope of this work, right? We're looking at a high-level fiscal impact analysis. They were tasked with going in and looking at a budgetary impact. They were not tasked with looking at this site as a developer would and testing every single hypothetical scenario.
I'll add to that we don't know what Washington and Venice is going to do.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And so as Devin stated, I think at the beginning of the presentation, the goal here is to maximize our opportunities to build and create new housing. And so with that as the basic premise, the tax credit is intended to nudge any developer on any site towards housing when they have the option to do something different.
All right. I hear what you're saying. I just, as one of the public said, that alternatives are often quite critical in any kind of analysis. And so this only had two alternatives, totally zero to this optimal price. And that seems to miss. It doesn't seem satisfactory in terms of the reality here. Anyhow, that was my question one.
I do want to I want to make sure that I'm clear, because it's my understanding that the goal of producing this particular scenario was to allow us to have the per unit cost impact, which allows us the most flexibility, because you can't if I could predict the future, I would be rich, right? If I knew exactly what Washington Advances was going to do, or I would win, I would have the lotto numbers. If I knew exactly what JBG was going to do, if I knew exactly what some of the property owners on New Hampshire Ave were going to do, then I would be rich, right? We don't know. But what we do know and what we can establish as a community is, how much housing do we have an unmet demand? How much housing do we need? And having this scenario based on what is realistic in terms of max build out based on the first parcel that may come up, is this 18,000 per unit, right? 18.8, right? And so that then allows us to say, depending on how many units, we don't necessarily have to do this 1285, but depending on how many units we think makes the most sense, it allows us the flexibility to estimate what the potential impacts of those units would be. Is that correct?
Correct.
Thank you.
If I just might just follow up, just one.
I'm sorry, we have three more. We have a couple more lights. I'm coming back. All right, Councilmember Small.
Thank you, Mayor. I appreciate it. I appreciate the courtesy on the days. I would like to make a point of order about something that's like a philosophical, argumentative problem that is occurring here. It's 100-level philosophy, logic. It's called a reduction to absurdity. which means that if you make an argument that is the most extreme scenario after you have required a really specific scenario, and we've all had to come and spend money on a specific scenario, it means that you're moving the goalpost while you were creating a different problem. And so in order to address this, I apologize to you as a professional who has vision and intellectual rigor. And I would ask you to allow for BAE to make a statement about their methodology and its relative effectiveness. Because what I think is happening here, that has continued to happen, is that people seem to think that you must not know what you're talking about because you're here. But then when we pay people, they must not know what they're talking about because everyone that's here must know. And so somewhere in the middle has to be a reasonable examination of the rigor by which this particular study was done. And I don't think anybody's going to allow you to justify that. And so if we could just have maybe a concise statement from the consultants about the methodology and rigor associated with specific tools that are related to encouraging a specific kind of hypothetical build, I would appreciate it. Thank you, Devin.
Yeah, so I think, Mary, if you could just briefly describe the process by which the calculations were done.
Sure, I'll try to make this succinct but cover the points. So the scenario assumes that the former hospital site will be converted to multifamily housing, and the project team assumed that the multifamily housing on the site would be built to maximize the housing unit density given the building and lot standards under the Tacoma Park Minor Master Plan Amendment. So that would be adding a total of 1,285 new multifamily units. We actually got that number from Montgomery County staff, who told us this would be a reasonable but aggressive assumption for the site based on that master plan. So we spoke directly to the individuals who helped develop that master plan and take it through the process.
Thank you.
Using that house, I'm sorry.
No, you could, I wasn't sure you were, I thought you were done. Please continue.
Oh, no, I mean, I'll give you a couple of other points just about it is using that model. We, as the project team, assumed that the 1,285 units would be absorbed over 5 years with 257 units absorbed per year. Given a development of this size, it would not happen all at once. And we provided that the multifamily build out would likely occur in phases. And then the housing absorption market begins in year 2 of the model, allowing for demolition of the hospital facility and the construction of the first housing phase in year 1. We did need to factor in the rent stabilization allowance. The rent increases, rent stabilization would go into effect in the 6th year of the multifamily property's lifetime, but in the years before that, the market rate units would match market conditions, and then the average annual growth rate prior, would be we looked at at the beginning of that fiscal year, the average annual growth rate would be calculated from the consumer price index per your code, per your policy, and applied to housing units 6 years after initial absorption into the market. And then for the first 5 years, we looked at rates for multifamily developments elsewhere in the county that were occurring. We had nothing to judge from Tacoma Park, as we've mentioned. We found in the city of Gaithersburg and the city of Rockville, respectively, that multifamily housing units that raised on between 2.95% and 3% in the last 10 years. So we would say a growth rate for those first 5 years would be 3% a year. That was assumed. And then the average annual growth rates were applied to an average assessed multifamily unit valuation for every year of the model. The average assessed multifamily unit valuation calculated from 2022 property tax assessments, which is the last year that the State Department of Assessments and Taxations did the property assessments. With all the market rates or a combination of market rate, affordable rate units built in 2015 or later, and excluding for sale condominiums, that resulted in an average valuation of approximately $281,414 per unit. The absorption of 257 units in year 2, accounting for annual market appreciation, results in a total approved value of $83,842,640. And that calculation was repeated to account for the absorption of the 1,285 housing units and the improved assessed value appreciation over 30 years. And after doing that estimate, estimating the total improved assessed value for the Hormel Hospital site, the project team looked at property tax revenue without the implementation of the new rental housing tax credit. Property tax collections in Maryland are divided between the state and the county and the city, and the county, and then the incorporated municipality in which the property is located.
I appreciate this, and I'm going to stop you here because I believe, and I would allege that this is in the weeds for some people, and in particular, there are economists floating around who may be interested in what you have said. But I would tell you that you have done an excellent job in being relatively succinct and specific about the manner in which you came to these conclusions. And that if people are interested in this from an economic perspective, rather than to gum up the works, that you have provided an ample amount of information for them to dig into. And so I thank you. And I apologize sincerely to you, Devin, for having to do that in the first place.
Thank you, Councilmember Small. So I do just have a quick follow-up question in terms of, because I think that 30 years is something that is challenging for people to think through, right? Like, because you're going to get the revenues back, right? And what this scenario basically shows during the first, you kind of, the age-old story of it takes money to make money, right? So the idea is that with the incentive and the development, you're foregoing revenues during that first up to 15, but the second 15, right, is where you would get that new assessed value. And so, and the difference, and I know that people have been asking for scenarios, the difference is if we kept status quo, which is a real alternative for us. I think that we heard this evening that there's no way with the MMPA that nothing is going to happen. Well, there's no guarantee that housing will happen.
Right. That's it.
And so the scenario, which has been real for the city of Tacoma Park, which is we have not had any housing created. So to assume automatically that the MMPA alone would build housing is not necessarily a correct assumption. Let's see, City Manager DeSpirito, do you want to weigh in on that?
Yeah, I'd just like to amplify what you've said. Now, changing the zoning to where it's feasible to do density, as the city council did with the MMPA, which went from, I think it was the underlying, Washington Adventist University was the underlying zoning, was baseline zoning of, was that an M60? Which was just single family. Putting the zoning in place helps set the stage, but it doesn't do the deal with developers because they're fundamentally two different things. The zoning allows, in essence, there is capacity for projects to qualify, but it doesn't do the financing. And the financing is the issue that developers are having. And tax credits speak to the financing side of the equation. Again, the zoning alone isn't a catalyst. It may help to set the stage, but without economic incentives, particularly as the consultant has pointed out, and it rings true with me from my own experience in this county in 7 years, is that, for a developer doing multifamily, there are higher challenges in doing other types of projects. Banks are less likely to fund it. There's more risk associated with it. The costs are relatively higher, and the returns are relatively lower. So having economic development tools like a tax credit, and it's not perhaps even the only thing that will help do a deal, but it is one thing that we can do proactively. But that does at least speak to the financing dilemma that developers have. And the dilemma isn't their profit margin. Okay, it's not about that they're capped on rents or anything like that. It's about getting a bank to agree to underwrite the usually multi-million-dollar construction loans over a good period of years. And that's the big hill that developers have to climb in order to make a deal happen. And so, again, I just wanted to try to help clarify that I think the zoning is one thing, and just the fact that the MMPA and the zoning has been put in place in and of itself, in my opinion, is not remotely adequate to make deals suddenly start happening, even if land's available, like at the Washington Adventist University site, because that's another thing that's just, yes, that helps make it a project more feasible, but the land available and the zoning have almost nothing to do with whether a project can be financed and actually happen. It's got to be some other economic tools and incentives. And frankly, we're competing with other communities and counties that do have such tools. And if we're the only ones in the block that don't, guess who's going to get the attention? And if we really do want to increase the housing supply, and we do have various ways that we can work with developers and try to have it done in such a way that it's meeting community standards. But if we're trying to get their attention in the first place, if we're the only one that doesn't have economic development tools in the toolbox, we're the last one they're going to talk to.
Thank you, City Manager. I'm going to go to some council members that haven't had a chance to speak first. Councilmember DeBala.
Thank you. Couple things to start. Just to remind everybody once again that this is one of 3 tax credits, and the other 2 focus on existing buildings. And that's just as, maybe for some of us, more important than the new credits. So turning to the new credits and the fiscal analysis, I have a couple of questions. I do thank you, Mary, for your technical explanation, because you clarified the place where I lost you on page 21. The way you explained it just now, I got it. So thanks. So that takes care of that question. I think the point is well made that we all knew that the plan was what could be allowed, which may or may not have anything to do with what actually happens on the site. And I think a lot of us saw that presentation that was done 3 years ago by Adventist University, and thought that meant that's exactly what we're going to get, and that I'm beginning to realize is far from a guarantee. And so to influence that seems important to me, to influence it in the direction of residential as well as commercial. So with that in mind, I did have a couple of specific questions. One is, there's been a lot of talk about MPDUs, and I thought somebody quickly mentioned what the current going rate for an MPDU is. Is it expressed in dollar rent, moderately priced dwelling unit? Is it expressed in dollars per unit, or is it expressed in the income of the people that live there? And the reason I want to know is this idea that 15% of them will be of whatever's built, whether it's at the hospital or it's infill on Maple or or it's whatever, that 15% of whatever's built is going to be that. So I want to compare that to our current market rate in Tacoma, our average rate in Tacoma Park, which I believe is lower. So that's why I'm asking. So can someone speak to what an MPD was worth these days?
Yeah, I can start, and Mary, if you can fill in with anything I missed. So BAE ran this down. It's at the moment, the way rents are set, and it's typical with buildings with regulatory agreements. They are set based on the adjusted area median income. So you'll hear things like 50% AMI or 80% AMI. And what that represents is, a percentage of that area median income. It's adjusted based on the unit size further, with the idea being that when we say 50% AMI, we take that household income and it's 30% of that gross household income. So that establishes the rents. They're updated annually. We can get you the income limits for Montgomery County that kind of show some of these breakouts.
But it's 30%?
So it's 30% of that median income level. So if they say a 50% AMI unit, the rent will be 30% of the gross income divided by 12 months. It's a whole calculation. Mary, is there anything I missed there?
Yeah, I didn't follow that. So 30% AMI, but say that again.
Yeah, so it's...
Or maybe just send me the numbers when we're all more awake.
I can happily send you the numbers because it is not a clean, line. It is a calculation.
All right, and then the reason I wanted to know was to compare it to what our average market rent in Tacoma Park is, which, as we saw in the report, is dramatically lower than the average rent
Yes.
in the city.
Yes.
I mean, in the county.
In the county.
So
Yeah, it's
So I'll say that our median rent usually is around $1,300. Our rent stabilized units, 93% of them would qualify as what are called very low income units, which are rent levels of that would be affordable to a household making 50% of the area median income. So these are deeply affordable units as market rate units.
okay.
Yes.
But
I would just add that those are some of the ones, in some of the buildings that you see in the area, I think in the Maple Avenue district, that we would call those naturally occurring affordable housing. So they don't have subsidy, they don't, they're not tax credit units, but that's what the market is right now, with what Tacoma Park has in place.
Okay. And then the other area I wanted to ask about is the impact of ending the credits for new construction early at 10 years without the step down to 15 years. And I did a rough calculation that said that we would get a sixth to a fifth of the dollars. We would never see them delayed. The flip of that is that the developer would have to pay a fifth to the sixth more during those last the 10 years 11 to 15. I wanted to see,
I'm sorry, Cindy, I didn't understand what you just said.
yeah, I can walk it through.
For
Um,
which credit are you talking?
So I'm talking about the new construction credit.
Okay, new rental.
Okay. So, two questions. What would be the impact to a hypothetical developer of multifamily in this market, in Tacoma Park's market, if that were to be something we would do to cut it off at 10 years? Second question, does that affect the assessed value of the property? No. Everybody's shaking their head no. Okay, so I'll let Mary address these questions.
Well, I mean, it would be, if you stopped the graduating down on the abatement, of the abatement, obviously be more revenue for the city, to do that. And in terms of how a developer would receive it, I mean, it could still be attractive. It's not as substantial of an amount. So, it may be that it there's a cutoff there, but it's just kind of hard to estimate. I mean, it would still be a benefit, I guess you'd say. So, I mean, it's certainly something that could be considered.
Okay, and the reason, just for those on the council that haven't heard this already, the reason that I suggested this is because 10-year financing seems to be more typical than 15, so why not focus, and if what we're trying to do is influence the financing, why not focus on 10 years? So that's why I'm asking the question.
Yeah.
Okay.
So when we were initially putting this tax credit together, we were thinking about LIHTC deals as well, which
okay.
are 15 years
Mhm.
and then have potential resyndication. And so we were kind of thinking about the whole realm of different deal types. But yes, if you are a for-profit developer and you are intending to sell, generally speaking, you're looking to exit your position sooner.
And so with the LIHTC deals, with the 15 years, so that would stack with the, is it number 2 or 3?
The affordable housing credit?
Right. And
Yes.
so they wouldn't get all the way to 100%, but they'd get close?
Correct. Now it depends on,
Again,
I'll
fifth
introduce
to
a
sixth
little bit of
the one part.
a little bit of complication here where it depends on what the initial assessed value is. So, for example, if you are a religious property that is building new housing, your initial tax bill is $0 since you were an exempt use. And so we would essentially for 10 years say, you don't pay any taxes. And then in year 11, or year 16, depending on when you want to cut it off, they would start paying that reduced 50% rate. If there was a tax bill before, you would be starting at that current tax bill that they pay, and then the affordable housing tax credit would layer on top and cut that in half.
And so for a hypothetical development for seniors at Grace Methodist, that's religious exemption, but the hospital site is no longer a religious exemption because it's vacant. It already pays some modest amount of taxes. It was in the report somewhere.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Honzak.
Thank you. I just want to start off because my questions may sound like I'm going a different direction, but I just want to start off by saying thank you. And also, I want to be very clear that I consider the construction of housing to be an incredibly important priority for the city. But I want some clarifications just so I can understand things better. I ran a bunch of numbers myself trying to understand the population growth rates, kind of how much housing we didn't construct over time that we perhaps should have just to keep up with county growth rates, and then ran some numbers to see what it would look like if we were to at least make up for that lost time and try to grow at the same rate as the county. And then I'm even thinking we probably should be looking towards growing more than that because we are so close to public transit. So with that in mind, I am wondering if Mary, if you could speak to, I know it wasn't exactly the mandate of this study, but having looked at the data, would you say that this credit looks like it might be enough to be a nudge that could possibly incentivize any of these developers to build housing on, for example, the site that has this maximum, build out possibility of 1,285 units on the hospital site. I know that wasn't your mandate, but you said you spoke to some of these kinds of developers. You were looking closely at a lot of the data. I was trying to find a line because I went through this one line at a time, but I did not highlight it. I thought there was a line in here that suggested that it might not be enough. Did I miss that line? I couldn't find it again. I'm sorry. I should have highlighted it.
I don't think we said that in the report.
Okay, I may have maybe I misread it or I misinterpreted what I thought I read. I couldn't find it again, so.
Yeah, I think we were pretty agnostic on on saying do more, do less. I do think that it would be attractive. And I think in particular, like as I mentioned, some developers do both affordable and market rates. So I think in particular, they'd like to see, I think this might be attractive to some of the ones who do both in particular. So I think it could make a difference.
Can you say why is that? Why do you feel that it would be attractive to those who do both?
I think because I think they have a stronger sense of the affordability issue, and this may be just conjecture. I'm not sure, but I get the sense from the position that I was in. I oversaw CDA, which is the Housing Finance Agency, and so we had there are different types of developers, and there are ones that want to do everything they can to stick to solidly market rate, but there are some that will do it and not fight it. And those are the ones that it's more of a feeling of, kind of talking to them and getting to know some of them that I do. But I do think that this would be attractive, and, it could be some of these other developers that I consider mostly market rate, would be interested as well. So I don't want to say that it's limiting, but I think it has some potential for sure.
Thank you for clarifying that, because since I wasn't able to find the specific line I was thinking of.
Well, real quick, Councilmember Honzak, because I think you might have flagged the sentence that I flagged, but it was more around, and I think it is on page 19. That was, the project team anticipates that the new rental housing credit will not incentivize redevelopment and replacement of existing multifamily facilities with new multifamily housing projects, and no new housing units will be produced in this area. So I think the interpretation of that, because we heard that there was a possibility that people will bulldoze down properties, multifamily buildings on Maple Avenue in an effort to get this credit, and this credit would not be enough for, and I don't want to, I'm asking just for you all to confirm, because it read to me that this credit would not be enough to incentivize someone to do a full rip and replace of multifamily housing that is already in existence. But in those instances where we don't have multifamily housing, like the hospital site where you're basically starting from scratch, it could be enough. Am I interpreting that correctly?
Yeah, I think that our feeling was, in looking at the possibility of some redevelopment of those existing multifamily, those other smaller, those relative, well, mostly they're not, some of them aren't super small, but on those lots, we felt that that because of the, they could hypothetically accommodate more housing units, but the cost to redevelop them would not yield that much more. we question the feasibility of that on those parcels. So we don't think, I mean, just for some of the reasons that I told you, how hard it is to finance these. Think about having to pay to demolish and then not getting that many more units because you're limited by the floor area ratio or just the size of the lot to do it. And that was what we just didn't see, that there would be the feasibility, there would likely be the feasibility there. And as I mentioned before, some of those units are functioning pretty well from what we can see, and they're naturally occurring affordable housing right now. And there's also deed restricted affordable that of course can't do anything with those in itself. There's some of that over there as well. Montgomery Housing Partnership has property there. So that was kind of that was our assessment. We didn't do a pro forma analysis on this. I mean, that wasn't part of our assignment. That's kind of what we saw, on those sites.
Great, thank you.
May I continue, Mayor? Thank you. Thanks for clarifying that spot. That is exactly what I had noted. So two other things, and I wish I could get your thoughts. One is my observation has been that about every 15 years with the LIHTC buildings, they do need refurbishment. 15 years is about the timeline where you have a lot of things need to be replaced, and it gets, the needs get deeper and bigger as the time goes on. So I don't know if this is really a question maybe more directed towards you, Mr. McNally, but since we're looking at some of these fiscal issues, I mean, can you just share some thoughts on what you were thinking as we went through that process with the credit in relation to the 15-year time horizon and the need then when we get to that 15-year time horizon approximately for reinvestment in the building, how that might play out?
Yeah, so when we were doing this, the new construction is to help get the housing built, and from then on, it functions under some of the other credits that we have. So we can't do everything with one tool, and so we have different tools for different situations. Is kind of the thought. If it's affordable housing, the goal is that they would, provide units that we would be interested in having in the city, and they would hopefully take advantage of our potential affordable housing tax credit, and that would be the city's contribution. They can go back to LIHTC and different sources at the state, county, and federal level to do rehab work. Ideally, they are tapping those resources first because they are bigger funding pools. And that, if they're providing the types of units that council sets forth in that ordinance, they would be receiving a tax credit in perpetuity with their regulatory agreement. For market rate buildings, it's a little bit more challenging. However, we do have tools. For example, our fair return petition, which does exist under rent stabilization. We also have the rehabilitation credit. Now, what I would say is that for a market rate building, particularly one that was recently built, they probably have some capital reserves to do renovations and hopefully are keeping up with their maintenance so that they're not coming in our door after 15 years. And we would likely be a little confused if they were coming in our door proposing a massive rehab after 15 years. So I think that there are different tools available. And in particular, if you're keeping up with maintenance, your building can go a lot longer without needing those deeper structural renovations.
Sure. And so then I wanted to just make an observation and again have you share some thoughts. The current dollars and future dollars discussion speaks to me. We do have a lot of older residents, and and when you look at a 15-year time horizon, you know, many of those folks might not be around anymore. And today's, you know, if today's, you know, if we're looking at a time horizon of 15 years, which I think we need to be as a city, having that long-term view, have we thought about, or have you guys thought about in the course of coming up with some of these credits, some of the alternative ways that one could structure this kind of a credit so that some of the dollars are, some of the dollars that are paid today wouldn't necessarily, or excuse me, some of the dollars that are not paid today, that we're not getting into our coffers today, wouldn't necessarily be seen as dollars that aren't coming in over the next 10 years, so that the rewards and the different, you know, the benefits and the cons to each generation of people that are living here are borne out a little bit more evenly over time. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think you're saying why
I'm not
an
using the right words.
incremental credit, why
It's
the
getting late.
increment, as opposed to maybe something like 50%.
Maybe. I mean, maybe I was just even, I don't know what some of the other different financing mechanisms might look like to get this housing off the ground, but where, you know, the first 10 years, we might see some kind of spread where some of the dollars that we're going to see in the future might come in earlier in a different form from using a different mechanism. I'm just curious if you brainstormed some of those and this seemed like the best option for different reasons.
Yeah, so we spent some time thinking about kind of what to do and what seemed like a good way. You know, do we do something on a per unit basis where we say we'll do a tax credit in the amount of X dollars per unit, or do a tax credit in the amount of, you know, this, you know, a set cap of like that. So we kicked around a lot of ideas. One of the reasons why we landed on the incremental credit was one of the first things we were thinking about was we did not want to change our revenue stream. So we didn't want it to impact current revenues. So that was a big part of it. The second reason is that it's very difficult to calculate a credit. And one of the concerns that we did have was if we do a per unit credit and the property winds up essentially like the credit winds up bigger than the property tax bill. Not a likely scenario, but certainly one that could happen. And so we were trying to do something that would kind of fit different scenarios, knowing that there are going to be all sorts of different potential projects out there. And that's something that also had the ability to scale in terms of what they're providing. So the idea being that we want to encourage investment within the city. And if you are making a larger investment in producing lots of housing for our city, you are getting a greater benefit. And so that is kind of how we landed on the incremental tax setup for the new rental housing credit. For the other ones, it was a little bit easier to kind of play those out because they're a little bit more straightforward. And so I admit this is a little bit more of a wonky one.
Thank you. That's all.
Thank you, Councilmember Hunzak. I'm trying to get to folks who haven't had a chance to speak. Councilmember Fulcher.
Thank you. I was wondering why we considered apartments on the multifamily apartments on the hospital site rather than a condo.
Yeah, so the tax credit, if they had built condos, would not apply to them.
Okay.
And we wanted to be very clear that we don't want luxury condos.
Okay. And then, but I'm sorry, when I read the report, it made it sound like it was more likely that apartments would happen rather than condos. Is that not quite what we're saying?
Generally speaking, condos, unless they are the high-end condos kind of seen in downtown San Francisco, New York, Boston, LA, are tricky to build. There's a few reasons for this, and I'm happy to pass along a report done by, I believe it was the Urban Institute, that kind of talks a little bit about this. There's insurance and warranty concerns that just aren't there with other owner-occupied for sale housing. There are difficulties. You're building a commercial building that will then be split up and sold, so there's additional complexity there. And I think finally, price points are lower for condo buildings, quite honestly, and so it usually is more difficult to pencil unless you're charging a very high rate in a very desirable location.
Okay. Thank you. And then what is the likelihood, and this might be more a question for the consultant, that we would see single family homes rather than multifamily homes if everything's left the same? Like, from what I'm reading, we're not seeing a big profit on multifamily homes, but what I didn't see is how that compares to single family homes. Like, I saw that it's like 7 and 9%, I think was the number that was in front of us, is the profit that developers currently seeing for a multifamily home. So how does that compare to a single family home?
Mary, do you have numbers on what typically the margin is on a single family tract developer?
I don't.
Okay.
I don't. I mean, we don't do much. I mean, for the first time in a long time, I'm actually going to do a few single family homes on a development in New York, but we don't deal with it a lot, in what we do because of what we do. I mean, we tend to work a lot on the affordable side. And it's more with apartments. So I can't speak to it as much, but I guess my thought is that I think that, the master plan actually, was more oriented toward denser development.
Right, because that's what we want, but
yeah.
And I'll
So I don't know. I mean, it's kind of like the problem with the single family detached is they take up more land. So, you're not getting as much on the land part, so it's yeah, that's for a developer. I mean, that, they would want to tighten the density as much as they can and make more money on the denser projects.
And I'll talk a little bit about kind of my past life out in California a little bit. Generally, the single family development kind of falls into two categories. You have the large tract single family development. So they're talking, scale of 200 units. There are big finance players. They're looking for big margins. They are taking new land and planning it out, going through a development agreement, sometimes called there will be like specific plans around this. Massive amounts of money to run new infrastructure into that. That isn't something that would happen here. The other category is flippers, so small scale, 1 or 2 homes at a time, where they're going in, gutting. You'll see it, I mean, the HGTV shows. And that, I think, is potentially, a risk for the city's multifamilies, particularly small scale multifamily stock, because they are structures that fit kind of a single family that can be gutted and turned into a larger home that could potentially be sold. And you see that with actually assessed values for these multifamily buildings, which is unusually modest, $500,000 to $900,000, depending on the structure. So,
thank you.
Okay, in the interest of time, I see 2 more lights, but I'm going to ask for people to please only ask one question because we do need to have conversations regarding next steps for the ordinances that will be coming up next week. Councilmember Gibson.
Yeah, one statement and then one question. Statement.
Two things.
Yeah, I'm generally quick, so anyhow, so I just wanted to follow up by saying that with regard to the teardowns and displacement, I am convinced that as you have said, that it's unlikely. I think that there's symbolic value to guarantee to Maple Avenue, that they would not be displaced, and I continue to propose that. But my question has to do with kind of building on the question about single-family homes. In terms of the multifamily housing, there's a range there. There are different types, and frankly, I think some of the types are ones that we would more likely need in this community than others. I wonder if you or Mary could speak to the types of multifamily housing that is I'll just say the most likely in terms of senior housing, in terms of the scale or the price point, just those kinds of questions about what in this marketplace might be with these kinds of incentives might be the most attractive or most likely to be built.
Mary, do you want to start?
Well, I mean, I think that, if you look at, if you're talking about housing types and different types other than just pure multifamily, I mean, I think there's probably, a townhouse is a possibility. I mean, or a 2/2 type unit. You often see
2/2. I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you.
a 2/2.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of, it looks like a townhouse, but it's not quite.
Mm-hmm.
It's more like a condo. But it's so those are, and you often see in developments. I just did something in Prince George's County where they were looking at a mixture of multifamily and then some of these types of either townhouses or 2/2s. So, I mean, that's a possibility for an area like this, and it would still be a pretty dense development. But if you're looking for rentals, then the rentals would be the apartments would be the best scenario.
Okay, I guess just to follow up the rentals, then would rental for specific groups have more or less appeal? Rentals for senior housing, for example, versus other populations.
Into Tacoma Park.
Well, senior housing, I mean, typically if you're doing senior housing, you would be talking about like tax credit housing or what would you, because there wouldn't normally be a development that's senior that's market rate per se.
Typically, when we talk about housing for specific populations, there are like tax credits or federally
Right.
subsidized units. So it depends partially on, and I'll dive into the weeds very briefly. When LIHTC projects are awarded, they follow states what's called a qualified allocation plan. And it's basically the state's way of saying, this is the sort of housing that we want to incentivize. It's their way of, their rubric, essentially, of what projects are most likely to get funded versus what projects aren't. It varies over time. Maryland has just updated theirs or is in the process of updating theirs. So I apologize. I don't have the updated one. Family housing tends to do very well. Located close to transit tends to do very well. There's typically some set asides maybe for example, in Maryland, smaller scale developments that is like a little bit of an innovation pool. So it really depends on kind of what the state and federal government is saying, hey, this is what we most prize.
So it'd be useful for us to know what that is, and
we can pass that along. We can get that and pass
qualified. What was the name again?
Qualified allocation plan.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Gibson. Councilmember DeBala.
Yeah, very quickly along these lines. This is for this is for new rental construction, not either of the others. So this is for 10 units or more. And I'm looking at the map, and it shows that you can build 4 to 9 units on some of the properties in Tacoma Park, are 10, 20, 30, as well as bigger units. And I'm looking at the current percentages of housing, and we have 13% of our housing is between 4 and 9 units. So my question is, how would it work if someone wanted to do a smaller, like housing for disabilities or housing for seniors that's 4 to 9 units, right? Does this leave that out, or is that okay? And so would we want, I'm still trying to make this into a missing middle housing credit here. Would we want to consider making it less than 10 units, or is the advice from Mary and Devin to really, if we're trying to produce housing, really try to produce housing, and not right now try to focus on the smaller units, but wait till the zoning, when and if the zoning changes, that we have more opportunity for the smaller units. So I guess I'm asking why 10, not 4 to 9, particularly if it's targeted to a group that needs more housing.
Yeah, so I'll split up that question maybe into two, if you'll allow me. For the reason why 10, we wanted this to be more aimed at kind of a larger scale housing development that is, multifamily rental. Generally speaking, there is a kind of gap in the market. There's not a lot of small scale builders that are doing that like 4 to 20 units.
Okay.
Partially because there are just, fixed costs in terms of construction that you need some economies of scale. That said, I think this is a great way to plug into kind of the, I think a comment earlier about the housing reserve, which is for special types of housing, particularly maybe smaller scale ones that are done maybe as innovation. That is something that I think the housing reserve would be very well suited to do. So I'll use a great example, which is our pilot project on Garland Avenue, where we used housing reserve fund dollars in conjunction with the state, a state grant, to turn a single family home into a duplex for 2 low income families with habitat. And that's where our money, our housing fund reserve can really, do a lot of great work, where, the scale of funds are just smaller. And so we're able to meet that need.
And about how much have we got in the housing reserve right now?
I think around $1 million.
Okay, thank you.
Great. Thank you so much. And so there's one thing that I did bring up. I know I chatted with you that I think might be good to share with the group. This scenario only accounts for housing creation. It does not account for increased assessed values that could be a reflection of, mixed use, which could provide. I know, Devin, don't laugh at me, but it's an important thing to keep in mind. So, for example, commercial development that maybe is a mixed use where you have housing and you have commercial, that also could increase increase the assessed value of the property, but wouldn't necessarily be, aspects of eligibility for the credit as it relates to commercial. So
I'm laughing because I feel like you read my talking notes.
Did I?
The 2 other pieces I wanted to get across, because there is one change to the ordinance where we realized that we had not included language to directly address this concern, where someone puts in, let's say 10 units of residential, they stick it in the back, and then they build a big Walmart or something, and they're like, I'm eligible for the full tax credit. And so we have included language that specifically states in a mixed use project, we are adjusting it based on the percentage of gross floor area that is residential. So if you have 70% residential in your gross floor area, you get 70% of the credit you would. If you have 30%, you get 30% of the credit you were. So the idea is that we're not interested in subsidizing any commercial development with this tax credit. We are purely focused on the housing that you are bringing into the city. So that is the one change, and then I'll get to the other bullet. Next week, you will see this ordinance broken up into 2 ordinances, one for each credit, so that they can be considered and changed individually. This is being done at the city attorney's office, so there will be no language changes. It is just purely putting it into 2 ordinances.
Okay.
I'll really quickly ask if you're moving into discussion, is it all right if Mary logs off?
Mary can go to bed. I'm so sorry, Mary, we kept you so long.
Thank you. Have a good evening, rest of your evening.
Thank you very much, Mary.
you.
Bye-bye.
All right. So I do just want to make sure that we're all on the same page in terms of next steps. I've been trying to keep track of questions that will need to be addressed. And I just want to make sure that we are still on the same page in thinking through matters that would need to be perhaps discussed amongst council, as well as potential modifications to the ordinances. So I just want to confirm, I know that there was discussions around the 10 versus the 15 year. So that was one item that was on my list. Are there, we heard Councilmember DeBala mention the point. I just want to make sure that that is still a point of discussion for others.
It is for me.
Okay. Okay, that's for you too. Okay. All right. So for council members Gibson, DeBala, and Hanzak, the point of discussion is 10 versus 15 year for the new.
Are you asking for proposed amendments?
Not at this time.
Okay.
For me, I just really want to make sure I've captured what I've heard, and
Okay.
so then that way we're not necessarily writing at the dais, but we can get some feedback before next week. And so that was one item, and I just want to make sure. Let's see.
It came up last week, not this week, but the idea of a 5-year or a 7-year evaluation.
I thought I heard 5. Is it 7? Okay, I'll just put it down because
Put
you're
down
right. That
5.
was the
I
point.
think-
You said last week. right?
Yeah. Do you want what we said last week?
No,
You just
not
want what we
exactly.
talked about tonight.
Because I know
I'm
that there
still
was,
confused.
no worries. So I just want to make sure that everybody's aware. I know that there's been lots of conversations and questions that people have raised with staff regarding modifications. I am trying to think through the most effective way for us to discuss those matters,
Thank you.
particularly next week. Where there are places where there are very clear, if it's a one-off question from a council member, it's a hand vote. But if there are things that warrant discussion for the council at large, it's better for us to go ahead and identify what those items are now. So for example, the 10 versus the 15 year was one point. I also heard from, if I remember correctly, Councilmember DeBala, I believe Councilmember Gibson also mentioned identifying a way for us to have staff come back and explain the impacts of, or certain aspects of the impacts of the credits over time.
Okay.
I heard it was 5 years. Some said 5, and I heard others say 7. Basically, having staff come back and present to council about the impacts of the credit.
And Mayor, the point of order on this, I'd like to express some concern about the potential of people who are, I don't know, I would like to express some concern about the prospect of people gumming up the works of actual hard work of the staff by making arbitrary suggestions about things. And what I mean by arbitrary is that advancing random assertions about things from the days or from policy considerations after like long hypotheticals of your own work is not of value to us making a conclusion on this process. And so I would like to exhort you to be very judicious about the up or down here, because sometimes people have to take votes, and if they're going to say no, they should just say no.
Thank you very much, Councilmember Small. I am putting together the list of the hands, the items that would ultimately need to have a hand vote. But I need to have a grasp of what those are and what those topics are so that we can be in a better place next week.
Thank you, Mayor.
Excuse me, Mayor, you'd mentioned a hand vote versus something else, and I just didn't quite catch your two options there. You said one off?
Yes, so for example, what I've been doing is keeping track of the topics that members of council have been raising over the course of the discussions around the credits. For those where I know I've heard a point raised multiple times, I am grouping them so I at least have an idea of how many folks are interested in making sure that we have a hand vote on that item. And then that way it makes it a little easier for us to know what needs to be voted on up or down. If there are council members that want to just push their own motions forward that are not necessarily shared by other council members or have been raised during discussions that we've had on the housing credits, then we will have, those items could be brought up during the discussion, but it would not, just know that you're not necessarily operating from a general consensus that's been gathered in the discussions thus far, and it would be an up and down vote for council members in terms of whether or not they're going to agree with any kind of
Thank you, Mayor.
modification.
Thank you, Mayor. Appreciate
Up
it.
and down, in any case, wouldn't it be?
It would be up and down, but
Just that you would probably want to give more time for the multiple.
I'm trying to, yes, I'm trying to
That makes sense.
bulk those things that I know I've heard over the discussions, more people have expressed some issue or concern with discussing. So I'm trying to identify what those are.
So I think there's one more that I'm aware of that several of us have been talking about, and I do not have not made up my mind about this yet. But the idea that we would not have the new construction credit open to all kinds of rental housing units, but some lesser set that targets middle income or somehow. It's been discussed, and whether someone is going to propose it, I can't
I would
say.
be sympathetic to that.
And I don't know who's sympathetic to it and who's not, but I do know it's been discussed.
So I want to just make sure, and Devin, I'm sorry, I'm looking for you. Help me.
Yeah, I might have expressed that the right way.
So are you talking about like targeting
Yeah.
in regards to units?
Yeah.
Are you looking?
It's Councilmember Duvall, can you repeat your question?
Maybe. So some of us have been discussing with the staff whether to target, to not have this open to all kinds of multifamily rental development, but to target it somehow to middle and lower income. Lower end's already taken care of, I guess, with the second credit, to target it to middle income. Is that the best way to phrase it?
I think if you're talking about like the discussion around AMI or MPDU requirements
Or acreage, yeah, that.
Oh, acreage requirements. Okay, sorry. Yes. I guess I'm looking for direction on what you're asking for from staff.
I have a question about this continued emphasis on what you guys say is missing middle, because I don't think that the definition that I understand it to be is actually in occurrence. Like at some point, it's market rate. Like there is no. It's you do affordable housing, or the market dictates based on the comps in the area what the actual financing is going to be and therefore what the actual rent is going to be. And as those comps change with supply and demand, the rates change.
So
This
the-
is not,
so the-
it's not even like
Yeah, so you may have an opinion on it. My point only was that this is an item that has been discussed, and if we're making a list of issues that are being discussed with staff, that's not just one person, I'm mentioning it.
Okay. Okay, so I just want to make sure, so it sounds to me like Councilmember DeBala, and again, I'm just putting this down. Aspects of middle income housing in that new credit. I will say, I agree with Councilmember Small. I'm not quite seeing it, especially given that we just heard data that stated that our market rates are below.
That's why I was asking all those questions.
Yeah.
And I think it's a good question. Thank you.
Okay. All right, Councilmember Small, you don't have the mic. Councilmember Fulcher?
I just want to remind my colleagues that I'm going to be grumpy and not going to vote on stuff that is not flushed out that comes up on the dais because I need time to think about it and make good decisions. And so, get it out there before we meet next time, what you're looking for, or else I'm a no.
Okay. Thank you, Councilmember Fulcher. Councilmember Gibson?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Councilmember Hanzak?
I had a question about the last point that you brought up, Manager McNally. I'm sorry, it's getting late. You were talking about that retail, and I'm bringing this up because I'm not sure if it's something that I would want clarification on. You just said you made an adjustment on the retail, the percentage of retail. It seems like that would encourage higher density housing to do that, more housing than not. If we wanted to see, as a city, if we were trying to nudge towards some retail, a limited amount of retail with a lot of housing, does the way that you've put that together, do you feel like that's the kind of nudge that we're getting, or we can't be that specific in sort of nudging that direction? Because it seems like that is the optimal scenario that that's played out in a lot of the data that we've gathered, is that people would like to see that combo. So what are your thoughts on that? I mean, and couldn't it be that might nudge us towards only getting housing and not necessarily getting, I mean, I know you can't predict the future, but what are your thoughts on that in terms of the way you designed the
I
amendment?
think it might be a little tricky. It would require some sort of tweaking and setting some sort of number on what percentage of retail is
optimal. And that would be over specific, right?
And
Yeah.
that could, I would be a
Okay, I
little
just wanted to hear your thoughts a little bit about if you thought that. Okay, thank you. Thanks.
All right, great. Thank you all so much. I know we're well over time. I just want to make sure that we're able to, I'm checking with Mr. Bodek around the budget amendment number 2.
Are you asking if we can
Yes.
push it back away?
It will be helpful. I think it might be helpful for folks if you push it back. Otherwise,
So the issue we run into if we do is because it's a 2 reading
that's right.
ordinance, is that the second would be in November after the election. There's one council meeting of flexibility there, but again, that occurs after the election.
So,
Mayor,
council members.
Yeah.
another alternative might be to have another session before that time.
So are folks willing to have an extra, I'm trying to see because we're not going to, yeah.
We gotta get.
Yeah.
So if the this final session was just the second reading vote for the budget amendment, I assume that might be a fairly quick council meeting to set up.
We can do it. We can't do it virtually.
It could be the Wednesday the 30th.
Okay.
I
we
would
can
like to
do
make
the
a motion
30th.
that we consider it read.
Can you hold on one second, Councilmember Small? Okay, on this point, because today, I'm sorry?
Already have something on the 30th.
So,
Yeah.
yep, we have a meeting before the election. So we will do this. If folks are amendable, we can have this item. Okay, can the city clerk please find time for us? There is no time. There is no time. There is no time.
So a Monday meeting isn't going to work?
Yep, it's not gonna work.
Quickly, Deputy City Manager, how long is the presentation for this?
This presentation would probably be 10, 15.
Okay.
10, 15 minutes.
Can we go through the presentation? Members of council will need to provide, we are not allowing for questions during this session, but you will have the opportunity to hear the presentation from staff. If you have questions regarding the budget amendment, please send them in writing. Mr. Bodek, you have the
I
opportunity.
withdraw
to do
my
your presentation.
amendment,
Thank you very much.
or my motion, sorry.
That's good.
So I will share my screen. Yeah, my screen. Okay, so I will go through relatively quick. This is a little bit of review, but there are a few changes from the conversation we had back in mid-September about the way that we will reallocate and obligate the balance of ARPA funds that have not been obligated by our deadline, which is the end of this calendar year. The general concept, the theory behind the concept, is that we have items in our current FY25 budget that would be ARPA eligible. So we would create a budget amendment where ARPA funds are used for those purposes instead of what they're currently being allocated for. And then we would create, with that intentional surplus that's created after having that revenue source brought into the general fund, we would create this special allocated reserve fund that would fund the projects that we are defunding now. So that's the concept. Once that transfer occurs, for those other projects like the atrium, for example, that's $1 million of this, we would then have the flexibility and ongoing flexibility to budget that just like we would any other general fund opportunity. So we would not have the deadlines and some of the other reporting requirements associated with it. So what we talked about last time was this list of currently projected unobligated funds by the end of the year. The only new item on this list, something that just came up a couple of days ago, we closed the multifamily housing and energy efficiency grants program. We had budgeted $705,000 for it. We only received about half of that in terms of eligible grantees. So knowing that, happy that we're still at this point able to be nimble and adjust that. So this is part of those dollars that we're saying is not going to be obligated, and we're going to look for some other general fund source for that. Just to remind folks, also part of this plan is the mental health clinicians pilot. Even though those funds are technically obligated right now because we have a contract with the county for those services, we're requesting to also use this mechanism because it will give us some flexibility were we able to receive other funding sources that could free up these funds for another purpose. I think in the memo you got kind of a very detailed rundown of where we're finding the money in the general fund, but here's a kind of a roll-up version of that. We're recommending funding for webmaster support through FY25. Those are through some current savings that we have within the ARPA fund. HCD and public works salaries, those are salaries of individuals who are supporting the ARPA fund right now as part of the administration of ARPA programs such as food insecurity. We initially, I had not had public safety wages and benefits within the plan outside of the speed camera fund. After some further review, we realized we would not be able to use some of those from the speed camera fund because of our statutory requirements with what speed camera revenues can be used for. In other words, we would not be able to transfer those revenues to these other purposes that we've talked about, which is why we looked for other sources of funding. Rental licensing, inspections, county contract, talked about that last time. The CIP expenditures and our red light camera expenditures totaling $2.5 million. So that's when we were able to post the document last week that was kind of the plan. Since then, we've added a little bit. Again, that's because of the multifamily housing grants. And so we have current contract, they're in purple there. We have current contracts for HRIS, and we're about to award a contract for our compensation and classification study. So that's why we're recommending that source. And as well as we recognize in the CIP expenses, there's our traffic study there, and we wanted to ensure that we aren't certain that will be obligated in time. So that's why we removed that from recommended allegations from what was in your council packets. And then just so here's that list of things that we would be creating the special reserve account for. The ordinance itself of that mechanism we'll present to you as part of the voting session next week. And this, again, this is review from what we talked about back on September 18th. The only adjustment being the multifamily housing rehab grants. We will have allocated designated surplus from that, or anticipated surplus from that. So that is all. Yeah. No questions. And if you have any questions on that, we didn't go over the general fund portion of this because there are a few requests and shifts within the general fund. But as you look through that between now and next week, if you have questions, please let us know. That's in the packet. Yep. I think there are only 3 or 4.
Oh, move.
All right, it looks like we're done for this evening.